This is my story of when I went shopping at Walmart almost 2 years ago. I'm a female for some background, and I went to a local Walmart probably about 10 minutes from where I live at maybe 10 p.m. or so. When I got there, the store was pretty quiet, with it being a little bit later at night. I started my shopping on one side of the store. Maybe 10 minutes into being there, I was alone in an aisle when a man entered it. I didn't really look at him, but he approached me and said hi. I just remember that he had really short brownish hair and he was slightly taller than me. I said hi back to him, and then he asked me if I needed a ride. I told him no and was kind of confused. The guy asked me again if I was sure I didn't need a ride. He came across as a little bit odd to me. I told him no, I was sure that I did not need a ride. The man said that he could give me one if I needed it. I started to walk away from him in the other direction, but he kind of followed me. He wasn't saying anything, but as I walked out of that aisle and into another one, he followed me. I continued to move farther away, and the man remained behind me. Eventually, I stopped, and the guy stopped again, and told me another time that he could give me a ride. It was getting really frustrating by now. I turned to the man and told him that for the last time I did not need a ride or want one, and I asked him to please leave me alone. The guy said, all right, and then he actually walked away. After that, I resumed my shopping. Eventually, I made my way over to the grocery area and got several items over there. I was in that area for probably 15 minutes or so. During this time, I did not see the guy. I went to the self-checkouts and paid for everything. The next time that I saw the man was right after I was leaving the checkout area and making my way to the exit. I started walking to the exit doors, and the guy was walking to them as well, but coming from the other side of them. I tried to avoid making eye contact with him. Still, I wanted to know where he was going to go, and if he was going to try to talk to me again. I stopped where I was and just stood there with my bags in my hands. I wanted him to leave the store first. The guy walked out of the doors, and then I started to leave after him. I went outside and looked around and didn't see him, so I started walking to my car. I was parked a ways down, about halfway back. As I was walking to my vehicle, I heard somebody start walking behind me sort of fast. It happened suddenly when I was almost halfway to my car. I looked behind me, and of course, the guy was there. He was looking right at me and walking in my direction. Possibly his car was also parked near the location of mine, but I more so felt like he was headed towards me again. I started walking faster, just to be safe. I felt like I could make it to my car before he would approach me, because I was far enough ahead of him, so I ignored him and kept walking to my car. I arrived and opened the door to the back seat to put my shopping bags inside. As I was doing this, I heard the footsteps behind me turn into running. I looked back and saw the man sprinting towards me. I tossed the bags in the back and moved to the front of my car. I opened the door and got inside as fast as I possibly could. When I was inside, I locked the door, just moments before the man arrived. He went straight for my driver's door right next to me and unsuccessfully tried opening it. Then he started knocking at the window. I started driving away immediately. He kept knocking on the window until I was out of his reach. He tried chasing my car on foot for a short time until I was far enough away that he couldn't catch me. Then finally, I was away from him. Luckily, I was able to get out of there before the man actually had a chance to follow me in his car or anything. But since that experience, I have not gone back to that Walmart. That man was sketchy from the very beginning. I can't imagine why he was asking to give me a ride over and over again. I would recommend anybody going to Walmart late at night to keep good accounts of your surroundings. I work at Walmart, and this is something that happened just last month. I mostly just stock shelves and work in the grocery department. One night, I was working and things were going pretty well. We had been busy, but things had quieted down a little bit. I finished stocking in the immediate area that I was in, and then it was time for my break. I made my way to the front end of the store where the break room is. When I made it close to the front, I noticed that there were some police officers inside. I found this to be a little bit strange. I sort of had to walk past them to get into the break room. When I did though, it seemed like there wasn't any commotion going on. There were maybe just 3 officers talking with a customer and one of the managers. The conversation was very calm, and I couldn't really make out what exactly they were talking about, so I just continued and then went in and had my break. By the time my break was over, everybody was gone. I still hadn't heard what it was about or anything though. I assumed that whatever it was, it had been resolved. So I went back to my area in the grocery department to stock some more shelves. After going back to work, the store only got quieter and quieter. I was in one of the grocery aisles towards the back. Probably 30 minutes or so after I had been back from my break, I was stocking a bottom shelf. This aisle that I was in had rice and beans and other things like that. The bottom shelf had some large bags of rice on it, and that shelf in particular was a little bit taller than the others. As I was putting another bag of rice onto this shelf, I noticed that there was a person laying down in the back of it. They were hidden, and it was a man. When I noticed him, he was looking right at me. I stopped what I was doing after seeing him, with a bag of rice still in my hands. He then started to move out from the shelf, and rolled onto the floor and then stood up. He was not very tall, was thin, and had dark hair. I asked him what he was doing. He didn't answer me, and instead just took off running in the other direction out of the aisle. I was so curious as to what he was doing that I kind of followed him out of the aisle, but he had moved away quickly, and when I got out of that aisle, I didn't see where he went. Seconds later, though, I heard a commotion a few aisles down. Somebody started yelling, and I heard the guy running again. I went over there and saw one of my coworkers in that aisle. She was saying to call the police. I asked her what was going on. She told me that the guy had been in the store about an hour earlier. He had tried stealing something and then had assaulted an employee near the entrance and took off. That's why police had been there before. Everybody thought that he had left, but I guess he had been hiding inside of the store. I was shocked when I heard this, because he had been hiding in my aisle. The police were called, and nobody knew where exactly the guy was. The last he was seen, though, he had been running towards the back end of the store now. The police arrived very quickly and talked to me and the other coworker. After that, they started searching all around the store. It took them about 15 minutes, but this time they located him. He was hiding in the back room, where there were probably better places to hide. Looking back, I had no idea who he was or why he was hiding in my aisle. I'm really glad that he didn't do anything to me. I still work at the Walmart, and things have been much better since then. I had a terrifying experience involving Walmart very recently. This was only a little over a week ago. I went to Walmart one night to do my normal grocery shopping. It seemed like any other night there. Other shoppers were all around, but the store wasn't overly busy or anything. I got a cart and went all around getting items. I was inside the store shopping for probably 30 to 45 minutes, I would say. When I was done, I checked out and left. Nothing about the experience at all seemed strange to me. In fact, it was very similar to any other times that I had been there. I shopped at that Walmart probably once a week, give or take, and I lived really close by as well. I returned home later that night, unpacked everything that I had bought, hung out for a while, and then went to bed. The next day, though, is when strange things started happening. I woke up to see that I had a direct message on Instagram. It didn't say who it was from, though. When I got onto the app, I saw that it was a request, meaning that I didn't follow the person that was messaging me. The message was from an account that I had no clue who it was. I don't even remember the username because it was like a bunch of letters and numbers all scrambled. The message was multiple pictures of me shopping inside Walmart. Some were pretty blurry or shaky, and it looked like someone had been secretly taking photos of me. This was enough to give me the chills. I had no clue why anybody would do this. I clicked on the user's page, and they had 0 followers, 0 posts, and weren't following anybody either. I replied to the messages asking who this was and why they took my picture. They saw my message very quickly, but didn't reply. This left me frustrated and also creeped out. I really didn't know what to do, but I figured it was just some random creep. At least that's what I was hoping, I guess. But when I thought more and more about it as the day went on, I wondered a few things. How did they find my Instagram? I didn't know how they knew who I was. And why were they taking pictures of me? I thought back to shopping and tried hard to think if I had noticed anybody following me or looking over at me strange or anything like that. but I couldn't remember anything out of the ordinary at all. I was pretty much just shopping for my items and focused on that, I guess. I went to work that day and then home afterwards. I didn't go anywhere else. That night, when it was getting late, I was in my living room and about to get ready for bed. It was probably like 11 p.m. That's when I noticed a car parked out front on the side of the street. It was unusual for cars to park there, and that's why I noticed. Its lights were off, and I didn't know how long it had been there. Of course, I naturally got nervous seeing it, wondering if this car was linked to the Instagram message. I knew it was likely just a coincidence, but I couldn't help it. I closed my curtains and then went to start getting ready for bed. But that's when my phone vibrated. I looked, and it was a new Instagram message. I clicked on it, really curious and scared to see what it was. When I saw it was another message from the same account, my heart sank. After opening it, there was another picture. This one was of my house, taken from the outside. I couldn't believe it. I ran back into the living room and opened up the curtains. I was just in time to see the car speeding away. I barely got any sleep that night. I didn't know what to do. This was extremely weird and creepy. Ultimately, I didn't do anything other than blocking the Instagram account. And the weird thing is that nothing else that I'm aware of has happened since. This was a little over a week ago, and I'm hoping not to get any more Instagram messages. This is my true scary experience that happened this past May. It was a weekend, and a Saturday to be exact. I had a lot of shopping to do, and I did not have to work, so I decided to get an early start in the morning. There were a number of things that I had to get, and I will spare you the boring details of everything, but basically, I'd be going to about 4 different stores around town. I live in a suburban area where they have just about everything nearby, and most of the stores are only a few miles apart, but not all of them. When I got groceries, I would always go to a local supermarket, so I decided that would be my last stop. My first stop was Walmart, and I don't typically go there. In fact, I hadn't been to this particular Walmart in over a month that I started out at. I made the 10-minute drive or so from my house to the Walmart, and I got there at probably like 9 a.m. The store was actually pretty quiet, and it made it easy to go in and find what I needed to, which is exactly what I did, and I was in the Walmart for maybe like 10 minutes. That was long enough, though, for me to notice a guy staring at me for an uncomfortably long amount of time. He was wearing sunglasses and a black baseball cap with no logo or anything on it. I spotted him when I was in the electronics area, and we were the only 2 people in that particular spot. I moved away a short time later, but I noticed the man again when I was up at the self-checkouts. I was checking out, and he was just standing a ways away. After I left the store, I walked out and got into my car. I did not bother to look behind me, and I wasn't worried that the guy might be following me or anything like that. As far as I was concerned, he was still inside of the store. So after that, I drove to the next store I needed to go to, which was a clothing store only about 5 minutes away. When I got there, I parked and went inside, only to see the same man a couple of minutes later. I thought that it was a coincidence at first. He wasn't staring at me now, but walking a ways away and looking in another direction. I went on with what I was getting and was inside for maybe 15 or 20 minutes in this store. But after I left this store, I began to get really suspicious. When I was walking to my car, I could tell that the guy was walking behind me. This parking lot was quieter and smaller than Walmart's, so it was easier to tell. He wasn't like right behind me or anything, but a ways back. Still, I could tell that he was behind me. I got inside of my car and then looked around for him. He got inside of a vehicle that was a little ways away, parked. I left and kept my eye on him as I did. I made sure that he didn't follow my car out right behind me, and he actually didn't. He was still parked when I got onto the road. I went to another store and didn't notice or see him there at all. Then I only had one more place to go. That was the grocery store. The grocery store was not all that big and had somewhat of a smaller parking lot as well. After I parked my car and went inside, I shopped, all without seeing the man. I actually forgot about him entirely. After finishing my shopping and walking to my vehicle, it was as soon as I stepped outside that I noticed him again. He was sitting in his car, but I could see him watching me as I walked to my car. It was obvious because there weren't many cars in the parking lot at all, and nobody was parked next to him on either side. I didn't know what the deal was. There was no way that this was just a crazy coincidence anymore. He didn't even go inside the store, but just stayed in his car. For a moment, I actually thought about confronting him, but immediately decided not to. I just went to my car, put the groceries in the back, and then started to drive home. As soon as I left the parking lot though, this time the man pulled out right behind me. Now the car was on my tail as I drove home. I didn't know what to do. Obviously, I know now looking back, I should have probably driven my car to a police station. In the moment though, I didn't think of it. I have no excuses why I didn't, but I was just driving home and hoping that the man would not go all the way there with me. But he did. For 10 minutes, he remained right on my tail, all the way until I got to my street. Now, when I reached my street, I knew that I had to do something, so I drove right past my house. After that, I went to the next street over and then made a right. This put me back on a somewhat busier road, and I knew the area pretty well. Not long after this, the guy made an opposite turn than I did. I was surprised, but it felt so good to see him not behind me anymore, and I turned around at the next opportunity and headed back to my house. At this point, it only took me about a minute to get back to my place. After I got on my street, I pulled into my driveway. I got out of my car and grabbed a few bags to bring them into my house. It was at this moment that I started to see a car pulling onto my street. It was the man, and I could tell. Now, he was still a far ways away, but would likely see me when he got closer. My car was right in my driveway, in plain view of anybody that would drive past. I sprinted to my house and unlocked the door and got inside as quick as possible. I literally just made it in a second before he drove past. I watched from my front window as the car slowed down and almost came to a complete stop. But it didn't quite stop completely. It went probably 2 or 3 miles per hour. This went on for about 30 seconds as it slowly made its way down the street right in front of my house. Then, suddenly, the car veered to the left and sped up. I watched it then drive down the rest of the street and even left my house to make sure that it was gone. Sure enough, it went on to another street. Then, I went to my car and brought the rest of my groceries and items inside. I went back in and checked out the window several more times to make sure that the guy didn't come back. I never saw him since. I really don't know who the guy was or what he was doing. He was definitely following me around, but for what reason, I don't know. The creepy thing is that he likely knows where I live. I'm hoping that he never decides to come back and that I never see him again. I went to Walmart very late at night a few months ago. The Walmart, located just a few kilometers from my house, is the most convenient place for me to shop, especially late at night, as the Walmart is open until 11 p.m. every day. One night, at about 10:30 p.m., I found myself completely out of toothpaste. Instead of putting it off until the next day like I had already done and forgotten, I decided to just go and get it over with. I headed out and drove to the Walmart. As expected, the parking lot was pretty quiet when I arrived. I got there maybe 20 minutes to close, so I knew that I had to be fast. When I was inside the store, I made my way to the right and over to where I suspected the toothpaste would be. I arrived at the aisle and started looking for the brand that I wanted. Nobody else was nearby at all, and the store was very quiet at this hour. After I found the toothpaste, I walked past a few more aisles heading to the checkouts. But when I passed by one of the aisles, I saw what appeared to be a man on the ground. I stopped to see what exactly he was doing because of how unusual it was. The man had moved a few items on the shelf to the side, and he then got onto the lowest shelf. It looked like he was going to hide on the shelf behind other items. I was watching him do this, and as he was going behind the stuff, he noticed me and kind of stopped. When he saw me, I turned and kept walking to go check out. But I only got a short ways before hearing the man emerge from the aisle behind me. I looked back, and he was now walking towards me. I had a bad feeling, and instead of going to the checkout, I went to the right into a random aisle. I don't really know why I did. I guess I wanted to see if the man was following me for sure, or maybe I wanted to lose him somehow. I went through where they had the temporary stuff, like holiday merchandise. Then I turned again and into another aisle. I walked a little ways and couldn't tell if the man was following me still or not. I didn't see him, but I was also changing aisles so often that it was possible. Eventually, I made it to one far side of the store. It was not the grocery side, but the other one. I made it into the sporting goods aisle and felt like I had finally lost the guy. I looked to my left and right and didn't see him. I decided that I would stay there for a minute or two and then leave. By now, the Walmart closed in less than 10 minutes. I was thinking the guy had either left, or maybe went back to the hiding place, whatever it was. As long as he left me alone, I didn't care. I looked at a few items that they had on the shelves, just casually. I then heard footsteps coming from one of the main walkways of the store, going past the aisle that I was in. I was near the end of the aisle, close to that walkway. I wasn't sure if it was the man or an employee or somebody else. When they came into view, thankfully, it was just another customer. The guy walked past me, and through the aisle, and then out of it. I went back to what I was looking at. I got a little bit distracted and was looking at some of the exercise equipment. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I looked back and saw the first guy who had followed me before, but now he was holding a baseball bat. He must have picked it right off the shelf at the end of the aisle, and he was walking towards me slowly. Then I heard somebody from behind him say, "What are you doing, man?" It was the customer who had walked past me. The man with the bat then turned and headed for that customer. The customer started running away. The guy with the bat chased after him. I ran after them but a ways back and got out my phone to dial for police. I wanted to make sure that the guy with the bat didn't catch the customer because the customer had kind of saved me. At the same time, I didn't want the guy with the bat to go after me again. An employee saw all of us running, and I remember yelled at all of us to stop. Maybe they thought this was some silly prank for a video or something, but this was very serious. The customer was able to get far enough away from the seemingly deranged man. The guy with the bat was not the fastest. I kept my distance, and eventually, he took a swing at a couple of products on shelves instead. I headed towards the front of the store, finding every employee I could along the way and warning them about the man. The police got there just minutes later. They found the man hiding, once again, in an aisle with his bat. He eventually came out without incident and gave up his bat. This experience deterred me from Walmart for a while. I didn't want to go back because I was afraid that something like this might happen again. But recently, I have been back just a couple of times. It's gone smoothly, but I will never forget that night several months ago. My name is Justin, and this is something that happened almost a year ago. I was shopping at my local Florida Walmart, and I was going to get just like one or two things. It was probably about 9 o'clock at night, so I didn't want to be there for a very long time. When I arrived at the Walmart, I parked in the back of the parking lot. Then I got out of my car and started walking up to the building. When I got close to the entrance, I noticed something crazy. There was a man standing on top of one of the vending machines Walmart had outside. The machines were maybe 20 feet to the right of the entrance door. I was wondering what on earth this guy was doing. Then the man started jumping up and down on top of it. There was nobody filming him or anything, so I figured that this was not some kind of a prank. As I got very close to the door, I sort of stopped to watch the guy. Another person was leaving the Walmart and saw the man as well. This guy started yelling at the man to get down from there, but the man did not listen and responded by jumping up and down even higher. The guy on top of the vending machine was wearing a large blue t-shirt, baggy jean shorts, as well as a backwards hat. At that point, I figured that I'd better move along, and I entered the store. I just kind of thought to myself, that's another day at Walmart, I guess. When I went inside, my main priority was to just get a couple of things for my garden. I walked all the way to the far right side of the store, and the aisle that I needed to go in was over there. After arriving, I started to look around, trying to figure out what exactly to get. There were a few different options, and I didn't really know what was best at first. So I was in that aisle for like maybe 5 minutes, and it was really quiet over there at this time of night. Then another person walked into the aisle with me. I looked over, and when I saw him, I realized it was the same guy who had been jumping on top of the vending machines. He started walking right up to me, as if he knew me or something, but I didn't know him. I said hi and asked him how it was going. The man then asked me if I had some extra money that I could spare him. When he spoke, I could tell that he seemed to be extremely drunk. He was also stumbling around when he walked. I told him no, I did not. Then I tried to walk away from the man out of the aisle. I figured that it would be best to just try to move away from the guy. But when I started to walk away, the man grabbed my shoulder and stopped me. I turned around and faced him and told him to leave me alone. I said that he was drunk and he should get out of here before someone calls the cops on him. This angered the man. I remember him saying, "How dare I talk to him like that?" He then walked over and shoved me a little. It was a pretty weak push, but I was about to punch him right there. Instead, I resisted the urge. I moved back and tried to just walk away. It wasn't worth getting into a physical fight with this guy. There was a shopping cart just sitting there between the aisle that we were in and another one. I'm not sure if it was a customer's cart who just left it, or if it was an employee moving stuff. Either way, the man then went to the cart and flipped it over. I chose to just get out of there. I walked away as quickly as I could and went towards the back end of the store. The man started walking in my direction, but he could not keep up with me, especially as drunk as he was. Pretty soon, I had lost him. After several minutes, I walked back over to where I had been before, and thankfully the man was now gone. I finally got the things that I had been meaning to. Then I walked up to check out and leave. When I got to the self-checkout area though, I noticed the man again. This time, I saw that he was at one of the check lanes. He was standing on top of the conveyor belt and screaming obscenities. There was a few employees standing around him, trying to get him to come down from there. The man wasn't listening to any of them. I'm sure that somebody called the police on him. I left the store and went home after that. That was the craziest thing that I've ever seen in a Walmart. Hopefully that man did not try to hurt anybody. I used to work at a Walmart a couple of years ago. This was my strangest experience. I mostly worked overnights and would stock shelves. It was an easy job for me. I would start at like 9 p.m. and at first the store would actually be open, but would close only like 2 hours into my shift. There would never be very many customers in that time anyways. A good number of us worked overnights because obviously Walmart is a really big store. On this one night, I happened to be working in the pets and supplies aisle, which is in the back end of the store. I had been working in that general area, but not that exact aisle earlier in the night, but by now it was about 11:30 p.m. Our store closed at 11, so we had been closed for 30 minutes now. As I was in the pet supply aisle, I was just stocking one of the shelves by myself. When the store closed, I would often put in headphones and listen to music while I worked, which is what I was doing. It helped work go by faster and easier for me. But out of nowhere, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It appeared as though somebody had walked by. I looked over, but they were now gone. I assumed it to be one of my coworkers, and once a few minutes went by, I kept working. Then, again, I saw somebody at the end of the aisle out of the corner of my eye. I looked over, and this time the person did not walk away. It wasn't one of my coworkers, though. It looked like just some guy that I had never seen before. When I looked at him, he disappeared behind the next aisle. I got up and walked over and then looked down the next aisle. When I did, I saw the man disappearing out of that aisle and into the one after that. I took out my headphones and then radioed in on my walkie that I thought I saw somebody inside the store who wasn't supposed to be here. After that, I kept doing my work. About an hour later, I went to the back room. That area was pretty large in our store, but I was the only one back in that section at the time. When I was walking over there, I was sure that I saw the man again. I could see him hiding behind a box underneath one of the shelves there. I didn't stare at him, and I acted like I never saw him. I was going to walk past, but I decided to turn around and then go the other way instead. He was maybe 30 feet away. When I began walking back, I heard noises behind me, even with my headphones in. I started running for the exit to go back into the sales floor. I heard footsteps behind me when I did. When I got there, I opened the door and the man did not come out after me. I ran to find the nearest employee. That was Al, who was working in the electronics overnight at the time. I told him that I saw a man in the back, and he decided to come back and see. I had a bad feeling, and I wondered if the guy was dangerous. We both went back there anyways. When we opened the door to the back, we heard the sound of another door opening. It was coming from one of the doors we had back there that opened up to the outside. They were rarely used. We walked in further, just in time to see the guy walking out of the store and the door closing behind him. After that, he was gone. I still don't know how the man got inside. My only guess is he somehow avoided all employees and hid inside the store until after we had closed. I also wonder what he was going to do to me when he was hiding in the back and then followed me. Luckily, I quit that job not too long afterwards. I was just at Walmart last night and something crazy happened. I was driving to get some replacement Halloween lights for my balcony. It wasn't too late at night, but it wasn't exactly the earliest either. The Walmart near me was still open for another hour though, which was super convenient. Before I left, I wanted to check and make sure that the lights didn't work one last time, as I was hesitant about going to Walmart so late. To give more context to this story, the city that I live in is not the safest. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff over the years, but this one event might be the wildest. So, as I was driving down the dark road to Walmart, I was all of a sudden passed by a bunch of police cars and fire trucks. They were driving really fast, and it seemed serious. When I finally arrived at Walmart, I saw that it was surrounded by almost a dozen police cars. Everybody was leaving, and when I went to ask an employee, he told me the whole story. A few minutes before I showed up, some crazy guy hot-wired an excavator in a construction site down the road. He drove it through a bunch of utility poles and even a storage unit, and he completely leveled it. Eventually, he made it to Walmart and started ramming the excavator into the automotive section of Walmart. After it stalled out, he got out and ran inside and pulled out a machete on a bunch of people. When the police got there, he refused arrest, and it took 7 cops to subdue him. This all happened right next to the Halloween section in the front part of Walmart, which is also near the automotive section. It's crazy to think what could have happened if I didn't test my lights and showed up earlier.
I live by myself in an apartment, which just happens to be very close to a Walmart. It's easy to go out and get my shopping done because it's less than a mile away. All I have to do is leave my apartment complex parking lot and drive for less than a minute down a busier street. Then I pull into the parking lot. Because of this, I've gone to that particular Walmart many times since moving into my place a little over a year ago. This story happened about 2 months back. It was probably like 8 or 9 at night. I'm not really sure exactly, but I was realizing that I needed to go grocery shopping because I was out of a lot of things. I planned to just go the next day, but I then remembered that I would be busy for most of it. I made the decision then that I would just get it over with and go shopping right now. It wouldn't take too long, maybe about 30 minutes. The Walmart was so close anyways. So I left my apartment and walked out to my car. My apartment complex has several large buildings and a large parking lot in the middle. After I got into my car, I drove the probably 2 minutes that it took to arrive at the Walmart. On this night, things seemed very quiet. The parking lot wasn't too full, and when I got inside the store, things were calm. There were other customers, but not a whole lot. I got a cart and walked around the aisles, trying to remember everything that I needed to buy. I always forget to make shopping lists, and that causes me to go all around the store sometimes. Finally, after probably 20 or 30 minutes, I had everything that I needed. It was maybe like 10 items, and I then headed up to the check lanes. I used the self-checkout and then left the store with my cart full of groceries. In the entire time that I was inside the store shopping, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. I walked out to my car, put the groceries inside of it, and then started driving home. A car drove behind me, leaving the Walmart parking lot, and it then continued to follow me down the street. This meant absolutely nothing until the car turned into my apartment complex with me. It still was not that big of a deal, and I figured that they lived there too. The car was a smaller and older looking sedan, but I couldn't tell you the exact make or model. I'm no car expert. I found a parking space near my building and then parked. The parking lot is basically a free-for-all. There's no documentation required or anything, and luckily the parking lot's never full. I noticed that the car that had been driving behind me parked near where I did, but across on the other side facing another building. Meanwhile, I was facing my building. I hadn't seen the car before, but I also never really paid that much attention. After I got out, I took all 3 of my Walmart bags that I had and started to head inside my apartment building. As I did so, I heard footsteps behind me, coming from the guy who was driving the other vehicle. I had assumed that he would have gone into the other building. Now it was apparent that he was going into mine. He sped up a little bit as I got closer to my door. Now, I always went in the side door that was right by the stairs. I used it because it was faster than taking the front door and walking down the hall to the stairs or waiting for the elevator. I found it a little bit strange that this guy was also going to the door. Most other people walked in the front. By the time I reached the side door, he was only like 5 feet behind me. I did get a little bit suspicious, but this man probably lived here, although I had never seen him before. He wore shorts, a dark gray sweatshirt with the hood up, and was carrying a Walmart bag. I didn't really want to let him in, but I didn't even know half the people that lived in my building, so I figured that he lived there, and I did let him in. I held the door for like a second extra as he walked in after me. I was hoping that he would walk for the hallway on the first floor as I went up the stairs to my apartment. But no, he went up the stairs after me. The building had 4 floors, and I was on the second. When I got there, I opened the door and headed down the hallway, and the man behind me did the same. By this point, I was feeling really suspicious, but also telling myself that this was just a coincidence. I soon made it to my door, which was the second one on the left, not too far down the hallway. There was a door directly across from me on the other side of the hallway as well. As I got to my door, I took out my keys to unlock it, and the man walked to the door across the hall. I looked over my shoulder and saw the man facing my neighbor's door across the hallway and pulling out his phone. I felt relief and assumed that he was my neighbor's friend or something. Then I opened up my door and went inside. The first thing that I did after entering was walk to my kitchen counter and put the 3 grocery bags on top of it. Literally right after I set them all down, I heard my apartment door start to open. I looked over and saw the man walking right in. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Out of instincts, I ran for the nearest room, which was a bathroom only a few feet away. I was able to get inside and close and lock the door. The man seemed to be right inside my apartment, and I yelled at him to leave now or I was going to call the police. He didn't say anything back to me though. I hoped that he wouldn't try to enter the bathroom, and luckily he didn't. He just stood right inside the doorway for a while, and I heard him lock my front door. Then he moved into the kitchen area, and then the living room. I wanted to leave, but I didn't think that man was far enough away. I didn't know if he would chase after me. I was wondering what he wanted and why he was in my apartment. Then it sounded like he was walking into my bedroom. When he did, I opened up the bathroom door and ran for my front door. Then I unlocked it as I heard the man walking back from my bedroom to where I was. I was able to make it outside into the hallway, and I then sprinted for the stairs. After getting downstairs, I went into the lobby and called the police. The lobby felt safe for whatever reason. It had a few tables, chairs, and the mailroom was there as well. I waited there the entire time for the police to show up, and I did not see the man at all in that time. I would guess that it took the police about 10 minutes. Soon, they appeared out front, and I ran out to let them in. I told them my unit number and waited in the lobby when they went up. But when they got up there, unfortunately, the man had left. I went back up to my apartment to see it quite messed up. The man had stolen a number of things from me. This was really frustrating, but I was okay, which was the good part, and now he was gone. I spoke with officers for about an hour and then filled out a police report. Then they left, and I was pretty scared for the rest of the night, just after what had happened. The guy didn't come back or anything though, obviously. I don't think he was ever found either. After this, I'm extremely careful now. I also haven't been back to that Walmart since. The man must have seen me shopping inside, and for whatever reason decided to follow me to my apartment. I'm a former Walmart employee. This is something that happened back when I was 17 years old. I had just gotten my first job ever, and I was working as a cashier at Walmart. It was not something that I really particularly enjoyed, but I was just really happy to finally have a job. I could earn my own money, so I didn't mind working there. Probably about a month into my time there is when this happened. I was working until 9:30 one night, which was the latest that I was allowed to work. I remember that things went by pretty well. It had become a quiet night. Soon, I noticed a woman approaching my register. She was just buying a bottle of water. The woman appeared to be about 40 or so, and she said hi to me. I said hi and asked her how she was doing. I remember that she called me cute, and then kind of started flirting with me. I was really surprised by this. I mean, I was like 20 years younger than her, and at first, I thought maybe she was just being nice. But then, she asked me what I was doing after work. I told her that I was going home and going to bed. The woman actually asked me if I wanted to hang out with her instead. I said no, I didn't think that would be a good idea, because I had school the next day. She laughed and told me to loosen up. I felt really awkward, and was still surprised by this whole situation. She then asked me for my phone number, but I claimed that I didn't have a phone then. I didn't know what else to say. So finally, the woman said that she would see me later and then walked away. I was glad that she was gone. I continued to work after that and only had a few more customers in my checkout lane. Then at 9:30, I was done. I left my check lane, clocked out, and then left the store. During this time, I drove one of my parents' old cars to and from work and school. So after I left the store, I headed out to my car parked towards the back of the parking lot. As I was walking through the parking lot, I noticed that a car was running and parked just a few spaces away from mine. I got closer and saw that a man was in the driver's seat and the same woman that had talked to me before was in the passenger seat. I just had a bad feeling about it. I didn't know for sure, but I was afraid that they were waiting for me or something. I thought that maybe I might get followed home. So I decided not to go inside of my car and drive away just yet. Instead, I decided to go back inside of Walmart. By now, I was maybe 20 feet from my car. I turned around and started to walk back. When I did, I guess the man and woman started driving, but I didn't notice at first. Soon, I realized that there was a car approaching me from behind. I looked and expected it to pass me by. It was the man and woman, and when they got even with me, they stopped and rolled down their window. The woman then asked me if I needed a ride. I said no thanks. She said they could easily drive me any place I needed. I didn't say anything and just started running back for the inside of Walmart. I was able to make it in and then stood just inside of the doors. Their cars seemed to drive away and go out of sight, but then I saw it at the back side of the parking lot. Soon it circled back around and passed right by me at the front of the store. I continued to watch, and they appeared to just be driving around the parking lot. This went on for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I really didn't know what to do. I was about to call my parents and ask them to come and meet me here or something. But finally, at last, I saw their car leave the parking lot. I remained inside of Walmart and kept watching for another 5 minutes or so, just making sure that they wouldn't come back. Then, I very carefully walked out to my car and got inside. I was able to drive home without a problem. After that experience, I worked at the Walmart for another 2 months. In that time, I never noticed seeing that woman again, and I'm really glad that I didn't. But still, I can't help but wonder what she was trying to do. It was all very strange.
I used to work at Walmart. It was back about 4 years ago, and only for part of one summer. I only lasted about a month before I quit. Of all the jobs I've had, that's by far the shortest amount of time I've ever held a job, but it just really wasn't for me. I wouldn't have worked there at all, but I really needed the money at the time. Shortly after starting out, they would have me work near the self-checkouts. I would basically stand there at one register and watch over the self-checkout area, and I would help any customers if they needed assistance. There would oftentimes be problems with the registers. There would be an unexpected item in the bagging area, or somebody would accidentally scan an item twice. One night, I was working until close, which was 11 p.m. It was about 9:30 or maybe 10 at night, and I had been working for a few hours already. The self-checkouts were mostly full. I think we had about 8 registers, and one was broken. There was like 5 people scanning their items, and I was just standing there in the corner watching. I noticed this one guy was kind of looking around at me, once as he walked by, and again when he got to the register. He had a basket that was full of items. I watched him scan an item, then put it in a bag, then put that bag in his basket. He then scanned just one more item and did the same thing, then paid. I watched him stuff a bunch of other items in the bags and then start to walk away. When I saw this, I was angry, because the man was clearly trying to steal a bunch of stuff. I walked after the man and caught up to him as he was leaving the checkout area. I said to the guy, "You know you need to scan all your items, not just 2 of them." He looked at me sort of surprised, but then his face turned angry. He asked me if I was accusing him of trying to steal, and then pointed out how he hadn't left the store yet, so he hadn't technically stolen anything. Then he took his 2 bags and tossed them into a display of candy that was on sale. He said, "There, I don't even want anything from this place," and then he left the bags on top of the candy and walked out. I wasn't quite sure what to make of the interaction. I decided to just go back to work, as we finally closed soon. I worked for about another hour, and then we were finally closed. I clocked out, got my stuff, and left. I walked out into the dark and quiet parking lot. When I reached my car, I got inside, only to immediately be blinded by a bright light right in front of me. There was a car parked directly in front of mine, and it must have turned on its brights right when I got inside my car. They were shining right on me. Then I heard a door open and shut. The next thing I knew, I saw the man again. He was approaching my driver's window. When he got there, he knocked on it. I had a bad feeling, but I lowered my window just a crack. He told me to get out of the car, and he wanted to talk to me. Based on his angry tone of voice, I was not interested in doing so. Why? I asked. He then told me to get out and cursed at me. Then he tried opening the door, which I locked just barely on time. He then started to go to the front of my car and kick near the headlights. I put the car into reverse and backed away, then sped out of there. Thankfully, the guy did not follow me in his car. After this experience, I strongly considered quitting and applied to work somewhere else the next day. I ended up getting a different job and quitting about a week later. I've seen some strange people at Walmarts over the years, but this man ranks near the top. I'm not sure how he knew which car was mine or why he waited for me to get off of work, but I'm really glad I didn't have to find out.
This happened a couple of years ago. For some background, I'm a female, and I went to Walmart one night, sort of late. I went there to get a couple of groceries, but not very much. The Walmart was probably like 5 minutes away from my apartment, so very close by and convenient for me. So I remember I left my apartment, drove to Walmart, and went inside of the store. There were various other shoppers around, but it really wasn't that busy. I'd made my way through a couple of aisles, and I was just in a random grocery aisle. As I was there, I remembered that a man approached me. He appeared to be about 20 years older than I was, had a goatee and short hair. He came across as a creep immediately, probably because when I was facing the shelf and getting something, he sort of snuck up behind me. He said hi really close to me, and I almost jumped back when it happened. Then he was telling me that I was cute and asked me for my number and stuff. I just told the guy no thanks and said that I had a boyfriend, even though I didn't. I was just trying to get away from the situation without much of a problem. The man did not immediately leave me alone though. Instead, he told me that we could still hang out and asked me for my number again. I said that I didn't want to give it to him and then said that I had to go. I started walking away from the guy at that point. At first, he stayed where he was. I went to the direct next aisle over just to get away from him. But then, I saw the man enter the aisle about 10 seconds after me. He once more approached me. He started trying to talk to me again and stuff. I told the guy to leave me alone. This was starting to become a big problem. I was trying to get the man to leave me alone, and luckily, another guy entered the aisle, possibly overhearing us. He went up to the guy that was bothering me and told him to leave me alone. The man bothering me told the guy to stay out of it and mind his own business. I remember that the two guys briefly argued, and eventually the man walked away, leaving me alone. I was really grateful to the other guy for helping out. The man was like, I don't know what that guy's problem is. After that, he said that hopefully the guy would leave me alone, and then he walked away. Now, at that point, I decided to hurry up, get my items, and then leave. I didn't want to give the man an opportunity to catch up with me again. So I went back to the original aisle that I had been in and found the things that I was looking for. Then I headed up to the self-checkouts. I bought the items and then left the store within probably 5 minutes. But after leaving the store, right when I was walking out of the doors, I noticed the man again. He was standing just out of the doors on the sidewalk in front of the building. I remember seeing him light his cigarette and then smoking it. When he noticed me, he started walking over without saying anything. I started to walk faster to make it to my vehicle, but the man appeared as though he was going to try to follow me all the way there. I then stopped right where I was and turned around. I told the guy to leave me alone or I was calling the police. The guy acted all surprised at first and said that he wasn't doing anything wrong. I didn't want to argue with him. and then I turned around completely and just started sprinting for my car. I was running as fast as I could, and I think that surprised the guy a little bit. It created a slight head start for me, and soon he started chasing after me, but I was able to make it to my car. I had unlocked the door before I got there so I could get in faster. Then, as soon as I made it inside, I closed the door and then locked it. After that, the man reached my car and tried opening the door. Then he just started banging on it. I backed out and left as quickly as possible. The man actually tried running after my car briefly, which I couldn't believe. After I got away, I called the police on the guy. I'm sure that he left the scene as soon as I was gone, but he wasn't able to follow me anymore. After that happened, I didn't go back to that Walmart for quite some time. Since then, though, I have been back, and nothing like that has happened. I certainly haven't seen the same man. Looking back, I'm really glad that I stopped to confront the man. Then I turned and ran. Sure, it was a risk to stop if he would have tried to grab me or something, but if I had just walked straight to my car, he might have caught up with me just before I got there. That's just my opinion anyways. I would warn anybody going to Walmart or any place late at night to be aware of your surroundings. That was my scariest experience at Walmart.
This happened on an early Sunday morning. At around 7:30 a.m., I decided to go to Walmart for some shopping. I went there at that time to specifically avoid the rush of people that would be in the store all day, especially on a weekend. I went into the store, grabbed a cart, and started going through the aisles. It was pretty quiet, with only a handful of people scattered around. Everything seemed normal until I made my way to the dish soap aisle. There, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted this heavyset guy who seemed to be just sitting there, and it was super strange. The guy was like sitting on the edge of the aisle and just staring at me. I shook it off, thinking maybe he's just sitting there for some reason. I moved on, but that's when things started to get weird. I noticed the guy following me out of the aisle, keeping a distance of about 20 feet. He continued to follow me throughout the store as I got other items. He was always a few steps behind, no matter where I went in the store. It was like he was shadowing me, and I couldn't help but feel annoyed and also creeped out. I tried my best to just ignore him, but the longer it went on, the more uneasy I became. I stole quick glances over my shoulder, and there he was, trailing me like a lost dog. The minutes felt like hours as I continued my shopping, and I was aware of his presence the entire time. I finished up, which didn't take that much longer, and when I was finally done shopping, I went over to the self-checkout area. I was planning to tell one of the employees that worked there at the self-checkouts about the man following me, but when I arrived, I looked behind me to see that he was now gone. I guessed that he had stopped, and that was a good sight. I scanned and then paid for all of my items. Then I walked out of the Walmart and headed for my car in the parking lot. I was parked sort of in the back, which is where I typically park, but when I got to within about 50 feet of my car, I saw the man again. The strange thing was that he was just standing there, like 10 feet away from my car, in front of it. He was already staring at me as well. I have no idea how he knew which car was mine. There were no other cars parked in any of the immediate spaces surrounding my car. This was really strange. I wasn't quite sure what to do, and I sort of froze where I was. The man had his eyes on me the entire time. I decided to just keep walking towards my car. Although I walked slow, I was ready to run if the man decided to go near me, but he didn't. Eventually, I made it to my car. The man was still staring at me as I got inside, and he didn't take his eyes off me the entire time. I started my engine and then left. The man kept standing there in the parking lot, staring at me as I did. I drove away and never saw him again. That remains my creepiest experience that I ever had at Walmart. I'm a female. I work a pretty standard job in an office 5 days a week. One thing I really like to do, though, is cook. I cook dinner for myself almost every night. In order to do so, I go to the store for fresh ingredients probably every other day. Right on the way home from work, there's a Walmart only about a mile from my apartment, and I found that they usually have the cheapest prices, so I go there for produce and protein all the time. Sometimes I go to other stores, but by far the most common one for me is Walmart. This story takes place just a few months back.
Like usual, I was stopping at Walmart after work. I would never get much, just like 4 or 5 ingredients usually, and sometimes whatever else I needed as well. I got off of work anywhere from 3 p.m. to 4, so I get to Walmart shortly after that each day. The store was usually sort of busy. One day, an employee by the produce area said hi to me. I mentioned this because the next time I was shopping, he said hi to me again when I was in the same area. Looking back, I hadn't really noticed him before, but I had never really paid attention to the employees. He was bald, had a small dark beard, and was sort of a big guy. He seemed very friendly, and the second time, he asked me how my day was going. We made very basic conversation for maybe 30 seconds before I told the man I better go, and I went on with my shopping. This ended up becoming a regular thing over the next couple of weeks or so. Every time I was shopping, this same Walmart employee would say hi and engage in conversation with me. I didn't mind it too much because he was always really nice, although when I was getting ingredients after work, I was sort of anxious to get home and didn't really want to chit-chat. The man did start to ask slightly more personal questions each time, like if I was coming home from work, where I worked, and where I lived, things like that. They were starting to weird me out a little bit. I wasn't sure if the man was just a really friendly employee or something else. I told myself he was just a nice guy, and like I said, it didn't really bother me. That was until one time I was walking through Walmart doing my usual shopping, and he approached me again. He asked me how my day was, and the usual. Then he asked me for my number. I was nice, but I told the man no. I was afraid he would get the wrong idea if I said yes. Besides, he should know how weird it sounded. I mean, come to think of it, I never really saw the guy doing any real work. He would always just be standing around and then talk to me. The man seemed offended when I said no. I started to try and explain my reasoning to the man, but he just turned and walked away as I started to speak. His whole body language changed. After he walked away, I resumed my shopping. He had gone further into the grocery aisles of the store, but luckily I didn't have to get anything back there. I was inside the Walmart shopping for maybe 10 more minutes before checking out and leaving. I remember that on that day, I parked in the back of the parking lot, and when I got inside my car, I noticed that the Walmart employee was inside a car not too far away from mine. I really have no idea how I noticed him looking back, but I'm glad that I did. I was assuming that he was either on a break or had just gotten off of work for the day. He did not appear to be looking at me, which I was glad to see. I pulled out of my parking space, only to see him pull out and exit the parking lot behind me. I watched in my rearview mirror, and he made the same 2 turns that I did to get back to my apartment. About a minute later, I was arriving at my apartment complex. I was kind of creeped out now because I was almost positive that this man did not live here. I drove around the parking lot of my complex a little and did not want to go straight to my building. I was really suspicious. The man's car trailed mine the entire time. When I realized that he was probably just going to follow me no matter where I went, I decided to leave. I did not know where I was going, but I needed to get out of there. I drove down the quiet road near the complex to a busier one. Then I signaled to merge onto a busier road. At this hour, that road in particular was really busy because it was almost 5 p.m. now and rush hour. With the man right behind me, I waited for a gap in the traffic. After about 30 seconds, there was one, but I waited until the very last moment and then pulled out. I basically cut the car off that was driving down the road, and there were several other cars behind it. The car honked at me, but the man behind me had no opportunity to merge at all. That allowed me to basically get away from the guy. I drove down the road for a very short time before turning. It was then that I had the idea to go back to the Walmart. I was fuming with anger. I drove straight back there and to the customer service counter. When I got there, I told them about how one of their employees had followed me home. This Walmart didn't seem to be the most organized, and they had to call up someone from the produce section to help. When I explained to them what had happened, they told me that nobody of that description works there. I realized that the man must have just put on a blue Walmart vest. Maybe he had worked at a Walmart in the past, or maybe he had just bought the vest online. Either way, he wasn't an employee of this store. I was even more creeped out now. They told me that they would keep an eye out for the man if he returned, which made me feel a very tiny bit better, but not a whole lot. After that, I very carefully drove back to my apartment again. Thankfully, I did not see the man or his car. I don't believe he knew which apartment building was mine either. Since that happened a few months ago, I have not seen the man. I also have not been back to that particular Walmart either.
This happened just a couple of weeks ago when I went to Walmart one night. I
I think it was about 8 o'clock, and I went there to only get a few things. When I got inside the store, it seemed pretty normal to me. It wasn't too busy, and it wasn't completely dead either. I didn't waste any time and started walking to the right. The first thing on my list was to get some more soap. As I was walking down that way, I remember seeing a man walking in the opposite direction. He was wearing a shirt that said "human mammal" on it. I specifically remember seeing that. But afterwards, I passed him by and kept walking. After getting the soap, I then headed towards the back end of the store. I was over there getting the last several items, and it took me a little bit over 5 minutes. Then I headed back towards the front end of the store. When I made it a little more than halfway to the front, that particular area was very quiet. But there was one person there, and they caught my attention. It was the man that I had seen earlier, and he was standing in a random aisle, just pushing things off the shelf. It was like he was trying to make a mess. The man had slightly long dark hair, was somewhat big, and a little bit less than 6 feet tall. When I saw him doing this, I couldn't help but look. I was going to just keep walking past him, but when I got kind of close to him, I stopped. The man looked at me as he continued throwing things on the floor. I asked him what he was doing. I didn't say it in a way as if I worked at Walmart or as if I was mad at him. I was just genuinely curious. The man looked at me as I spoke, but did not stop his actions. After my question, he looked away and completely ignored me. I looked around and did not see any employees in the immediate area. When I looked back to the man, he was giving me the middle finger. I thought about saying something to the guy, but decided not to and just walked away. Somebody would see what he was doing soon enough, and he would probably get kicked out of the store or banned. I walked the rest of the way over to the self-checkouts. Then I checked out and started to leave. Well, I guess as I was checking out, the man in the human mammal shirt walked over to me without me knowing, because as soon as I was walking into the parking lot, I looked back and saw the guy walking behind me. He was like 50 feet back, and at first, I wasn't sure if he just happened to be leaving at the same time as me or not. I don't even know why I decided to look behind me, but I'm glad that I did. The guy appeared to be looking right at me, which was strange, but I ignored it. I continued as normal and got to my car, unlocked it, and went inside. I wasn't in a rush to leave or anything, but when I started the engine and was getting ready to back out, I saw him. The human mammal had followed me all the way to my car and was now standing right behind it. He was looking at me through the rear window of my vehicle. I waited for about a minute, and he didn't move at all. Then I rolled down my window and yelled to the guy, asking him to move. He ignored me completely. He just stood there with barely any expression on his face. This guy was really confusing to me. I honked my horn, and he still didn't move. So then, I turned my engine off and got out of my car. At first, the man still didn't move. I asked him what his problem was, and he still ignored me. I wasn't really sure what to do. I didn't want to get in the guy's face or anything because he seemed sort of unpredictable. I decided to walk back inside Walmart. As I went through the parking lot, the man calmly walked behind me, following me yet again. By the time I made it to the doors, he was maybe 10 feet behind me. When I walked inside, I wasn't really sure where to go, so I just started walking. But when I made it sort of past the self-checkouts, I saw a few employees standing around. The man behind me was still about 10 feet back, and one of the employees approached him. He tried to walk past, but another employee walked in front of him. I heard that they were confronting him about throwing things off the shelves of the aisles. Somebody must have seen him, or possibly he was seen on security cameras. This allowed me to get away from the guy, and I turned around and left the store while he was still there. This time, he wasn't able to follow me. I left and haven't seen him since. Hopefully he was banned from the store or something. I'm really not sure why he did all of that. It was like he was just trying to cause problems.
Hi everyone, I just want to say that I'm a long-time viewer of the channel, and I've watched some of the other Walmart videos. I myself had an interesting experience not long ago at all. I was doing some normal grocery shopping one night, and I went to my local Walmart. It was probably like 8 p.m., and things were not too busy anymore with it being nighttime. But still, there were a number of other people around, and I would not call the place dead by any means. So I walked in, got a cart, and then began my shopping. I started heading to the side of the store opposite from groceries. I figured that I would go around and do my grocery shopping last. As I was walking to that side of the store,
I passed by several people. One of them in particular caught my eye. It was a man, and for some reason, something about him looked familiar, or like I knew him from something. But he didn't look familiar at all, and I was pretty sure that I had never seen him before. But my mind was mostly just focused on remembering the items that I needed to get. The man was wearing a t-shirt that said "human mammal" on it. I realized after a few seconds that it was the shirt that was familiar. I knew that I had seen it someplace, and I was racking my brain to remember where. I kept walking away from the guy in the opposite direction. Maybe he noticed me kind of staring at him a little strange when passing him by or something. He didn't immediately follow me, but later on, I saw him again. I went to one of the back corner aisles of the store to get food for my dog, which was over there. This aisle was extremely quiet, and nobody else was nearby. I was in the aisle for maybe a minute, shopping around, when I heard somebody else enter. I looked over, and there he was, the human mammal himself. It was at that moment when I remembered a guy wearing the same shirt in another Walmart horror story video. I've never seen anybody wearing a shirt that says that before. I realized that this might be the same guy. He had now walked into my aisle and was just standing there staring at me. The man had longer dark hair, was about average height, and a somewhat large build. After noticing him staring at me for a few moments, I said hi to him in the most friendly way possible. The man did not say hi back to me. Instead, he took a couple of steps closer, but continued to just keep staring in my direction. Then he turned around and walked out of the aisle. I was relieved to see him go. I didn't know why he was acting so strange. I remained in the same aisle for just about another minute, and then I moved along. Soon, I was maybe a couple of aisles over, getting some other things. There was still nobody else in the immediate area over here. Out of nowhere, I heard somebody approaching. I turned and looked and saw the same guy. When he entered the aisle, he picked up the first thing off the shelf and tossed it down on the floor. Then he revealed his other hand from behind him, and he was holding a small hammer in it. Of course, I was instantly nervous when I saw that. He then just stopped and started staring at me again. Was he trying to threaten me? I asked him what he was doing, still trying to be friendly. He did not answer, but started walking a little bit closer to me. I told him that he was making me nervous holding that thing. He still ignored me. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I took my cart and quickly turned it so that it was blocking almost the entire width of the aisle. Then, using that as a sort of shield or roadblock, I turned and sprinted out of the end of the aisle. I could hear the man starting to run out of the aisle in the other direction. I ran along the back side of the store until I found an employee. Then I stopped and approached her. I was also looking around, and I did not see the man anywhere, so he must have stopped chasing me. I told the employee that there was a guy walking around with a hammer acting really weird. She told me that she would look into it, and then radioed in to another employee. At that point, I decided to just leave. I did not want to be inside of the store with that guy any longer. I walked to the front, very careful to look out for him, and thankfully I did not see him. Then I checked out and left the store. I remember that when I got to my car and was putting the items in the back, I saw 2 police cars drive up to the front. They parked along the sidewalk in front of the main entrance. I figured that they were there for the human mammal guy. Then I left. Now, I went back after this and listened to the other Walmart story again when I got home. This guy seemed to have the same kind of behavior, plus he was wearing the same shirt. Now, I know he got banned from the other Walmart, so either this is a different location or he showed up anyways. I really can't believe that it happened still, and I had to write in. Anyways, hopefully this guy doesn't cause any more problems.
This happened just a few months ago as I was shopping at my local Walmart. I'm a younger adult female. There's a Walmart just under 10 minutes away from me. One night after work, I stopped at the Walmart because I needed to buy some new wireless headphones after mine broke. It was nighttime, and when I got inside, I saw that the store was pretty quiet. I made my way towards the back middle of the store, which is where the electronics department is. However, about halfway through the store, I realized I had to use the bathroom. I knew they had some restrooms in the back of most Walmarts, and they're typically used less than the ones in the front of the store, so I kept walking back there. I found them, and then went inside the bathroom. I was in a stall for not more than a minute when I heard the sound of somebody walking in. The footsteps were moving closer and sort of fast. Then they stopped right outside of where I was. I saw their shoes from below, and they were big. They looked like men's shoes. Through the crack of the door, I didn't see the person, but I heard a whisper. It was a loud whisper and definitely a man's voice. He asked if I would let him in. I was disgusted and said no. He then asked again and laughed a little before trying the door, which was locked. I told the man firmly to go away, and thankfully he finally did. I left very shortly after that and made my way back into the store. The bathrooms were right by the electronics department, so I walked right over to see the headphones. I found the ones that I wanted to get, which were the same ones I had before, but they were locked in a case. I walked over to find the person that was working in the electronics department, and I found a man behind the counter they have there. I told him I was looking to get some headphones that were in a case, and he walked out to help me, but when he did, I noticed his shoes. They were the same ones of the man who was in the bathroom. I was immediately creeped out. As soon as he unlocked the case and I took the headphones, I walked as fast as I could away from him into the front of the store. I bought the headphones and left. Once I got in my car, I called Walmart and reported the incident. I'm not sure after that if he got fired or anything, because I didn't go to that particular Walmart location again until just a few weeks ago, but when I did, he wasn't there. This happened about 5 years ago. At the time, I was out a little bit later at night, and I needed to get a few groceries on my way home. I normally didn't get groceries at Walmart, but as late as it was, I thought it would be the only place that was open. I think it was maybe 11 p.m. or so, and when I got there, I parked towards the back of the parking lot. There wasn't a whole lot of cars there, but it's always been a habit of mine to park away from places. I've never really liked squeezing my car in tight parking spaces because I'm not a very good parker. Anyways, I parked my car and got out. Right away, I noticed that there was a man smoking a cigarette, and he seemed to be kind of just wandering around the parking lot. He was a little ways away from me, and it looked kind of suspicious, but overall, I didn't think too much of it. I walked inside and got my groceries. I really didn't need too much, maybe about 5 items or so, and I was inside the store for maybe 10 minutes. I then checked out and left to walk back to my car, but when I got about 50 feet into the parking lot and headed for my car, I saw the man again who had been wandering around, but now he was standing at my car as if he was going to try to break in or something. I stopped where I was and froze. I watched the man examining my car and walking around it. He looked like he had something in his hand, but I couldn't make out what it was. I considered what to do. Should I walk over there and yell at him? Should I call the police? Or should I just go back in the store? I decided to do none of those things. Instead, I stayed where I was and then pushed the lock button on my car. I was hoping the guy would hear this and run away. Instead, he looked around and then saw me. We made eye contact, but instead of running away, the man looked right at me and smiled. It was a creepy smile, and he then waved me over as if encouraging me to go near him. The insane-looking smile on his face did not make me want to go anywhere near. I just kept standing there. Then I saw the man start to walk towards me. I turned into the other direction and ran back into the Walmart. When I was inside, I called the police and told them what was going on. I did not see the man inside the store, so I assumed he was still outside. I didn't go back outside until the police were there. When they did arrive, my car had been broken into, but I really didn't have anything of value in there. It was just a little messed up basically, and the window was smashed. The man was long gone though, and I pretty much wasn't missing anything, so I just told the police what he looked like and then went home. The thing that bothers me the most about this was how the man was waving me over to him in the process of breaking into my car. It made me wonder what he was capable of. I used to work at Walmart as a cashier several years ago. I was in school at the time, so I usually was part-time and worked on nights or weekends. One day, I was working on a Saturday from sometime in the afternoon to about 10 o'clock at night. Those were the hours that I usually got. It was a pretty typical shift with us being very busy and me getting a lot of customers through my lane. At one point, a man came into my lane and bought a wireless speaker. It was one of the more expensive ones that we had, and I think it was over $100. When the man saw the total, he complained immediately, saying that the item was on sale and it should have been half off. I looked and saw that the item was clearly not on sale, but to satisfy the man, I even called up someone from the electronics department. My coworker David came up to the lane and confirmed that the item was not on sale and hadn't ever been on sale since we had it. The man was clearly making it up to try to get a discount, and after my line was held up for over 5 minutes because of him, he continued to complain and refused to pay. I told the man if he didn't want to buy the speaker, he would have to leave my lane because there were lots of other customers waiting. He kept on complaining and started to get personal with me. Generally, I consider myself to be a patient guy and always tried my best to be nice and respectful to the customers. But something about this guy, from the very second he started complaining, he was just so rude. When he started saying I was an idiot, I told him to leave. This only provoked him even more, and after cursing at me, the man finally left. I was so happy that he was finally gone, and even though it was a negative experience, I was happy to now deal with more normal customers. I kept working, and several hours later, when it was now nighttime, I looked up to see that in line was the same guy from before. He had a somewhat long beard and wore a hat and sunglasses with a red sweatshirt, just like he had been before. I got a bad feeling when I saw him in line with an angry look on his face. I dreaded when it would be his turn in line, and when it was, I looked to see that he didn't appear to be buying anything. He just walked up to me and said to me, "You didn't think I would come back here, did you?" I didn't say anything. The man then said that I better start watching my back, and then just walked off. I was very surprised at the lengths this man was going to show his anger with me. But what could I do? I was glad I didn't say anything back to the man, even though I wanted to, but I kept it professional. My shift went for another hour or so, and then I was finally done. It was a long day, and I was excited to get back home and relax. I left the store, which was now pretty quiet, and walked to my car in the back corner of the parking lot where I always parked. As I was approaching my car, I heard someone yell at me from about 30 feet to my left. I looked over and saw the same guy. He immediately cursed at me and started walking towards me from a car parked behind a tree to the right. I didn't really have time to say or do anything before I saw the man was coming towards me. This prompted me to start running to my car. I then heard the man begin to run as well, which made me go even faster. I made it inside my car and locked it and started the engine. The man kicked at the side of my door pretty hard as I started to back away. I drove away as fast as I could, and thankfully he wasn't able to get back to his car to follow me before I was out of his sights. I went home, and when I got there I saw that there was a dent in the side of my car where the man had kicked at me. I couldn't believe how angry the man was and how he literally waited for me to get off of work. The next day I went back to Walmart and told them everything that happened. I quit my job, and thankfully Walmart offered to pay for my car to get fixed.
This occurred several years ago. I used to shop at Walmart's quite frequently. They really sold everything I needed and were all over the place, so it was always my first store to go to. At one point, I had to go out of town for a work conference. It lasted about a week and was about a 10-hour drive away. After it was over, I was driving back. I was on the way home about halfway, and it got pretty late at night. I was prepared to drive through the night, but my car got low on gas, so I stopped at the next exit and filled it up. I was pretty hungry, but noticed that the convenience store of the gas station was closed. This town was really small and didn't seem to have much, but they did have a Walmart that was across the street. This Walmart was one of the strangest ones I had ever seen. It just wasn't the typical kind of Walmart building that they usually are in. The building seemed smaller, and more as if it had taken over a building of a previous store that had been there. The parking lot was quiet, only a couple of cars, so I looked it up on Google Maps, and it said sure enough it was open. This seemed kind of surprising to me because it was around midnight, but I pulled my car into the parking lot and went inside. As I slowly walked in, I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I guess just some type of food. As I walked around inside, I didn't notice anybody else. The inside of the Walmart looked for the most part like a regular Walmart, but at the same time, a lot different. It was much smaller inside and arranged differently than most of the ones I had been in. Still,
Not a big deal though, and I tried to find something I could snack on. As I walked around, I didn't see anybody else in the store at all. It seemed a little bit odd to not even see a worker, but then again, it was midnight in a small town that I had never been in before. I had made it to the back aisle and was looking around when I heard the noise of someone walking. They entered the aisle from the far side from where I was in, and I noticed it was someone wearing one of those horse face masks that covers a person's whole head. I looked and it startled me at first, but then I chuckled. I guess it was some guy pranking people late at night. He stood there looking at me. Then he walked away. I told him it was very funny. I finally found a couple of things and picked them up. Then I headed to the front of the store. As I did, I noticed another person walking by, also wearing a horse mask. I thought maybe it had to be the guy's friend and they were both in on the joke. I once again smiled and kept walking. I used the self-checkout and paid for my things, all while not seeing a single employee. As I was almost done, I saw another 2 people emerge from behind one of the check lanes. They were both wearing horse masks as well. By that time, I got a rush of fear run through my body. I didn't know what was going on, but it didn't really seem like a joke to me anymore. I looked back and saw the other 2 people in horse masks staring at me from the back near the aisles. I tried to not let them see the fear that I had. I calmly got my receipt and walked away and out the doors. I walked all the way back to my car, hoping that I wouldn't hear the footsteps of anyone leaving behind me, and to my surprise, I didn't. But when I got to my car, I realized there was a new car that was parked next to mine. I tried to ignore it as best as I could, and got to my car, unlocked it, and quickly got inside. As I did, I glanced over to the car parked next to mine. At first, it looked like it was empty, but then I saw a horse mask pop up in the driver's seat. I just about had a heart attack in that moment. I slammed my foot on the gas and left that city back to the freeway and on my way home. I got home the next day and still wonder what was going on there.
I used to work at a Walmart. It wasn't exactly my dream job, but I didn't mind it that much either. Most of the time that I worked there was after close. I would work in the back, organizing and getting products, and then I would often bring them to the sales floor and to the shelves. I did this for all sections of the store. During the time of this story, I had been working there for about 6 months already, so I was pretty familiar with the place. It was a weeknight at probably about midnight. I was a few hours into my shift and was in the back room of the store. I was getting items that would be put on the shelves of the store when I heard a loud noise. It was like a thud, and it was coming from the back room area right near where I was. I couldn't really tell exactly where the noise was coming from though. I looked around but didn't see anything. The noise startled me pretty good because nobody else was back there with me. I finished what I was doing in silence and then went out to stock the shelves. I returned a while later to get more items in around the same area in the back. About 15 minutes into doing that, I once again heard another loud thud. I still couldn't pinpoint exactly where the sound was coming from. There were lots of shelves back there and many products and equipment all around. There were countless places where somebody could hide if they wanted to, and I knew that. Then I heard the noise once more. I looked around, still seeing nothing, and then I got up. I walked over to the direction of where I thought the noise was coming from, but when I got there, I couldn't see anything there. I looked all around. I didn't know if I was in the right spot. I was just guessing. I asked if anybody was there, but got no reply. Things were extremely quiet. I just shook my head and then went back to work. I wasn't really sure what I could do about it. I got more products to put on the shelves, and the entire time I was back there though, I will admit I was pretty scared. I didn't hear the noise again though, and I finished up as fast as possible. Then I went back out into the store. Eventually, I had to go to the back room yet again, in the same area that I had been in. I would be working there for most of the night. When I made it into the back again, by now it was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. I was there for no more than 10 minutes before hearing the loud noise another time. This time, I jumped up. I was determined to know who was doing this. I ran over to the area, calling out, "Who's doing that?" as I was running. But when I got closer, I really had no idea where it was. There were so many aisles of shelves back there. I knew it had been a distance away from me, but not all that far. I looked up and down, left and right, all around me, and I still didn't see anyone. I went into one of the little aisles that we had back there. Then I quietly looked around. As I was there, suddenly there was a noise. It wasn't a thud or a loud noise though. It was a whisper. Hey you. Somebody was whispering from the next aisle over. I immediately ran out of there. I ran all the way back out and into the store. I then found the nearest employee. He saw how I was shaken up and he asked me what was going on. We both ended up going back to look around. I felt a little better with another person there, but we still didn't find anyone. We also didn't hear any noises back there either. I ended up working the rest of my shift in fear, but nothing more happened. I'm not sure if that was a person who hid back there since we had closed or what. That would be my best guess. They possibly kept hiding back there or left when I ran out. I don't know who or why though. Maybe it was just to scare me or maybe something else. I quit my job at Walmart not too long after this. I wouldn't say that was the incident that caused me to quit. I'd been thinking about quitting for a while. It certainly didn't make me want to stay though.
Last year, I went to Walmart at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I occasionally worked really late, and on this day, I worked well past 1 a.m. I needed to get groceries, and I really wasn't that sleepy yet, so I decided to stop at Walmart, knowing the store was open, but nobody would be there. I got in the store, which was in fact dead, and started to shop. I only noticed a couple of other shoppers. When I got to the back corner of the store to get yogurt, I noticed a man standing next to the shelves, just staring at me. At first, I thought maybe he knew me, but I didn't recognize him at all. He kept a completely straight face. He just wouldn't take his eyes off me. I said hi and nodded my head at him. He just kept staring. Didn't acknowledge me at all. I thought something must be wrong with him, so I got the yogurt and moved on. When I left the aisle, I heard him start to follow me. I tried my best to just ignore him. Maybe he was playing a dumb prank on me or something. I only needed about 2 more things, so I quick grabbed them and headed to the self-checkout. The man followed me all the way there, about 20 or 30 feet behind me the whole time. When I was checking out, I thought about alerting a store worker about the man, but I decided not to. I just wanted to get my stuff and go home. I finished checking out and began walking to my car. I got out of the doors of Walmart and the man continued to follow me out into the parking lot. I increased my pace to get to my car so I could drive away. Then, the man started to full out sprint at me. When I saw this, I ran to my car. I struggled to open the doors with bags in my hands. I finally got to the door and jumped inside. I slammed the door shut and locked it. The man reached my car and tried opening the door just a few seconds later. Now he didn't have a straight face anymore. He had a big smile which looked completely insane. He banged on my window until I quickly drove away. I have not shopped at Walmart since.
I'm a female. Last year, I wanted to get a quick birthday card for my friend. I stopped at a Walmart, thinking that I could go in, quickly get a card, and then leave. I parked and went inside, walking straight for the greeting cards. They were sort of in the middle of the store. The store was actually not that busy, but of course there were some customers around. When I got to the card aisle, nobody else was in it, and I began searching for a decent card for my friend. I had to look at quite a few, many of them I didn't like. I was focused on this and reading the insides of them when suddenly I heard a voice directly behind me. "What you looking at?" This surprised me because I hadn't known anybody else was in the aisle with me. I turned around to see a man standing there less than a foot away. He was around my height, but appeared to be much older than me, and he was wearing a hat. I told him that I was just getting a card. He then stared at me with a creepy grin for like 5 seconds straight. I started to turn back around when he spoke again. He asked me if I was going to a birthday party and if he was invited. I laughed it off nervously, thinking this was a really creepy thing to say. I decided that the card that I had in my hands was good enough. Really, I just wanted to get out of there and away from him. I told the man that I was in a hurry and I needed to leave. Then I started walking out of the aisle. The man started walking right along with me. "Okay, let's go," I remember him saying. This really freaked me out. Did he think he was coming with me? I walked almost as fast as I could over to the checkouts, but the man was able to keep up with me. When I had almost made it there, I changed my mind at the last second and decided to walk to the back side of the store. I just didn't want the guy around me. I especially didn't want him following me out to my car. I thought maybe he would get the hint and leave me alone. The guy seemed confused by my sudden change of direction, but turned to follow me. I walked all the way to the side of the store where they sold makeup and toothpaste and those kind of items. Then I turned and headed for the back. I couldn't believe it, but the man was still behind me. That's when I saw a Walmart employee. I was almost in the back corner and there was a man working near the auto parts area. I outright told him that there was a guy following me and he wouldn't leave me alone. I started to hear the man denying it as the employee approached. That allowed me to get away. I kept walking and made a left into an aisle and out of sight of the man. I quickly then walked into the middle of the store and then turned to go back to the front. When I got within maybe 2 aisles of the front of the store, suddenly the same guy leaped out from behind a corner. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know where he had come from. I screamed and sprinted away from the man. This seemed to surprise him, and he didn't immediately chase after me. Another employee happened to sort of be in the area and asked what was going on. Less than a minute later, the store security was there. Apparently, when the other employee questioned the man, he had ran away, so the employee called security. It was a whole scene, and the police ended up getting called. Unfortunately, the guy ran out of the store right away before security could get him though. Needless to say, I haven't been back to a Walmart since. I had a bizarre experience working at Walmart one time. I worked there for a few months after high school. When I worked, I was a cashier, and I would just ring people up all day. It was a pretty easy job. Of course, some customers were pretty strange. Others could be rude or whatever, but most of them were fine. One day though, I was working a shift that started in the afternoon and I got off at night. Things started out all right, and then it got a little busy. During this busy time, I was ringing up customer after customer when this one guy showed up in line. I didn't even notice him until he was next up. The man was wearing all black and had a ski mask on. Obviously, this was kind of strange. It wasn't Halloween. I expected the guy to buy something, thinking maybe this was just his style. But he walked right up to where people pay, like directly facing me. He didn't give me any items to scan, and he just stood there, staring at me. I could only see his eyes, and I noticed that he was even wearing black gloves. He didn't have any items with him at all, though. It was just like he had came here to stare at me. I asked him if he needed help finding anything, and he didn't answer. Just kept staring. Some of the customers in line behind him began to laugh a little. I didn't know whether to join in laughing or to be creeped out. The guy just stood there. I asked him if he was going to buy anything, and he remained there, frozen. Then, he took a step closer, which felt sort of threatening, before backing up and walking away. It seemed like he left the store after that. I felt like I had been subject to some sort of prank, and I laughed it off. Then I continued ringing up everybody else. In fact, looking back immediately after it, I actually enjoyed it. Now I had a story to tell my parents when I got home from work, and it broke up the otherwise monotonous shift. Things carried on, and for the rest of my shift, everything was normal. A few nights later, I found myself working again. This time, I was almost done with my shift, and it was probably like 9 p.m. The store was quiet, and I was ringing up a customer every now and then. That's when I saw the same guy wearing the exact same thing, walking into my line again. This time, it felt different. It was a little creepier. There were no other customers around to laugh at him, and being nighttime, it just seemed a little spooky. I smiled and greeted him. Once again, the man walked right up to me and just stared without saying anything. I asked him if he needed help with anything again, and was once again ignored. The guy stood there for a really uncomfortable amount of time. I could only smile and laugh so much. Things got old fast. After he stood there for probably 2 minutes straight, I asked him seriously what he was doing. He still didn't say anything. Finally, he walked away, leaving the store. He hadn't bought anything this time either. I worked for the final hour of my shift, not getting too many customers at all. Then it was finally time to go home. I left the store and walked to my car in the parking lot, but when I was approaching it, I saw there was a car parked next to mine with the masked man in the driver's seat. I had red flags going off in my head, and I turned around and went back inside the store. I just had a really bad feeling about it. I waited inside the Walmart for quite some time. When I returned, he was finally gone. I left and luckily never saw him again. I still wonder though, who he was and what he was doing. This happened in the year 2000. My name is Vanessa, and I remember that one day I went to my local Walmart to do some shopping. I would go to several different stores in the area back then, but for whatever reason on this day I chose Walmart. I believe that it was a Saturday morning. After parking my car, I walked inside of the store, and I remember that I was not inside for that long. I think it was maybe 10 minutes at most. Now, I don't recall what exactly I bought there. It wasn't grocery shopping, but I was probably getting some random household item or items. Anyways, after checking out, I left the store. Things were not really that busy, and I walked back to my vehicle. I had parked on one side of the Walmart. Back then, I believe there was only one entrance, and the stores weren't quite as big as they are today. So my car was about halfway back, a little bit to the right of the doors. When I was almost at my vehicle, I saw that there was another car now parked next to mine. I didn't really think much of it at all. As I got closer though, I noticed that there was a driver inside the car that was parked next to mine. It was a man, and the engine of his car was running. I got inside of my car and went to start my engine. It was at that point when I noticed the man rolling down his window. Then he sort of waved at me and motioned for me to roll down my window. I don't recall in great detail what the man looked like, but I do know that he was wearing sunglasses and he had sort of spike bleached blonde hair. That was popular back then. So I rolled down my window because I was curious as to what the guy wanted. The guy then asked me for directions to my house. I laughed and figured that he was joking. Something about the guy kind of gave me a bad feeling though. I rolled my window back up, and as I was doing so, I heard him start to say some more things. But I didn't hear what, and didn't bother to roll my window back down to have him repeat himself. Then I started to back out and leave. As soon as I started driving away though, the man started to drive after me. I was hoping and thinking that he would drive in another direction, but as soon as I left the Walmart parking lot and went back onto the road, the man followed. Still, I didn't know how far he would be driving behind me. It could have been just a coincidence. I continued with my route to get home. It would take me maybe 10 minutes. As I kept driving though, I noticed that the man stayed right on my tail the entire time. The roads were not really too busy, so that allowed him to easily keep up with me. I made it almost all the way back to my house. When I pulled onto my street, the man did the same. I realized then that he was going to follow me wherever I went. Now, this was before I had a cell phone, and I didn't know where the nearest police station was. So I looped around my street and then went back to a busier road. At first, I didn't really know where I was going to go, but I had the idea to go to a busy place with lots of other people. Then I would feel safer. So I decided to just go right back to the Walmart where I had been. The man continued to follow me in his car the entire way there. Eventually, I pulled back into the parking lot. This time though, instead of parking towards the back or middle where I had been before, I drove to the front. There were far less parking spaces closer to the store, but I got lucky and saw that there was one open space. I pulled into the space, and now there were cars on both sides of me. This did not allow the man to park next to me. Instead, he was in his car behind mine and kind of blocking the lane between parking spaces. I turned my car off and got out. Then I ran towards the front of Walmart. I saw a man that was also walking in, and I told him that I was being followed. I pointed to the other guy in the car. When the guy who had been following me saw this, he started to drive his car away in another direction. I got to the doors of Walmart and noticed the man drive towards the back and then park there. Then I went inside of the store and walked over to the customer service area. There, I asked them if I could use a phone to call the police. I told the employee my situation, and she let me use the phone. I called the police and then waited inside the store for them to arrive. When they did, I met them out front. Unfortunately, though, the man was now gone. I gave a description of the vehicle as well as the man, but I did not get the license plate number or anything. It was also good news, though, that the man was now gone. That allowed me to go back home. So after talking with police and Walmart employees for a while longer, I left. After that, I never saw the man again.
This story happened several months ago now. I'm a female for reference and went to Walmart pretty late one night. I'm not sure exactly what time it was, but the store was very quiet. I was just getting about 2 or 3 items and was not going to take very long. So when I was inside of the store, there was hardly anybody else inside, just a few employees and customers here and there. I shopped for maybe 5 minutes if that, then went up to the front of the store to check out. At the self-checkouts, nobody else was really around, but there was one employee standing sort of near it. I started to walk inside, and the Walmart employee spoke. He said that all the self-checkouts were out of order and I couldn't use them. The man said he could ring me up quick and motioned for me to follow him. We walked a couple of lanes down to the checkouts and the guy walked behind it. He was sort of short, had long light brown hair, and was kind of skinny as well. I put my items down in front of him and he started to scan them. He asked me how my day was going like many cashiers do. But after that, he asked me where I was going now, and I just said that I was going back home. The guy then asked me if I wanted to hang out with him, and I said no thanks. It seemed really strange for him to ask me this. He asked me if I wanted to get some food instead or something like that. Still, I said that I really had to get going. The man didn't say anything. He angrily handed me my receipt, and then I started to walk away. I found the whole interaction to be really weird and also awkward. So I left the store and then headed to my car in the parking lot. I had to go all the way to the other side of the store though, because they had closed the doors on the side that I had parked on. So after walking out, I had just about made it to my car and was maybe 20 feet away from it. That's when out of nowhere, I heard a voice behind me. I looked and saw the Walmart employee who I had just seen like a minute before. It really took me by surprise, and he seemed to come out of nowhere. He once more asked me where I was going. As I saw him walking closer to me, I quickly went to my car and got inside of it. Luckily, he didn't run over and try to get in my car or anything. I started the engine and drove away. Since that happened, I have not been back to that Walmart, or any Walmart for that matter. I'm not sure if that guy was off work when he did that or what, but I think it's really crazy how he followed me all the way to my vehicle. I also wonder if the self-checkouts were really shut down, or if he just wanted me to go to his register. Either way, I have no plans to return to that Walmart, and I'm hoping that I never see that guy again.
A couple of years ago, I went to Walmart at night with 2 of my good friends, John and David. I don't remember exactly what we needed to get there, probably food or something, but I do remember that we wound up near the sports cards because John was really into them at the time. The 3 of us were in high school, and we were looking at a box of baseball cards when a man approached us. He looked to be about 25 to 30, was wearing a hood, and smelled like cigarettes. He asked us if we drove here and if we could give him a ride. I said, "No, sorry, I can't." He said that he didn't need to go very far, but he really needed a ride. I still said no, and he stood there for a good 10 seconds before finally walking away. My friends and I then went to another section of the store for a couple minutes before checking out and leaving. When we left the store, we saw the man again. He was standing outside the door smoking. He looked at us, so we tried to avoid eye contact, but he started to approach us again. we just ignored him. The man started to walk with us to my car. He said once more that he really needed a ride. I told him no yet again, and my friends and I got into my car. As we got in, to my surprise, he helped himself and got in the back seat. He said now we don't have a choice, with a smile. I told him to leave the car. He responded by saying he was not leaving until I drove him where he needed to go. Finally, I asked him where it was he needed to go. He replied by saying I would find out when I got there. This guy was being super sketchy, and I couldn't help but think of him having us drive him to a spot to get robbed or something. My friend John told him he was going to call the police if he didn't leave the car. The man said something along the lines of if we called the police, he would hurt us all. We were high school kids and not that big, but 3 against 1 I thought maybe we could take him. But then again, I had no idea what this man was capable of. The man told me to drive, and so I started to drive. Just a couple seconds later though, to my surprise, we saw a police car that happened to be pulling into the parking lot. The man cursed at us and then told me to stop. I stopped the car and he got out. I don't know if the man just really wanted a ride or if he had bad intentions, but I'm glad I didn't find out. I work at a Walmart stocking shelves. I frequently work overnight shifts, and that's when much of the stocking is done. Our store is a 24-hour store, so I occasionally have to deal with customers, but usually I don't interact with them much at all. A couple of weeks ago, I was stocking the shelf of a cleaning supply aisle near the back of the store. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was restocking hand sanitizer when I heard someone walk from the aisle behind me to the aisle I was in. I briefly looked, and from the corner of my eye, I could see someone entering the aisle. I kept working, and I felt them walk past me into the other end of the aisle. The person then walked back over to me and tapped me on my shoulder. I looked, and I could see it was a man. He appeared to be about 25 years old, with a goatee and long hair. He asked me if I could help him with something. I asked him what he needed help with. He just stood there looking at me for a good 5 seconds before he responded. He finally told me that he needed some toothpaste. I told him where it was, but he insisted I go with. So I stopped working, got up, and started to walk with the man. As we were walking over, he seemed to know where we were going and was leading the way. When we finally arrived, I was shocked at what I saw. Just about every item from the shelves had been thrown onto the floor, and there was a huge pile of toothpaste as well as toothbrushes and other items all over the floor. The man just looked at me and smiled. I asked him if he did this. He smiled at me with a creepy smile and said yes. He then took off and sprinted away towards the exits and ran out the store. I ended up having to clean it up. This was by far the strangest thing that ever happened to me while working at Walmart. This is the creepiest thing that happened to me when I used to work at Walmart. I worked there for almost a year stocking shelves. I would mostly work nights and would get off of work shortly after we closed. Now, when we were approaching closing time, there would be a mix of overnight employees and people like me at the end of their shifts. And in a store like Walmart, of course, there were tons of employees. As I was stocking one of the shelves, counting the minutes until I was off one night, I remember that this guy approached me. By now, the store was mostly quiet and probably had more employees inside of it than customers. I looked over and saw this man that was an employee. He was wearing the Walmart vest, and he said hi to me. I said hi to him, and he told me that his name was Tony and he was new here. Tony had very short dark hair and was about 5'5" or so. I asked him if he was working overnights, but he didn't answer me. He just said that he liked the job so far and asked me what time I got off. I said that I was about to leave, and that's when Tony said that he was as well. He then asked me if I wanted to do something after. I said no. I was really tired and I just wanted to go to bed, which was true. He said that was cool and that he would see me later. I said bye and then got my cart and quickly finished it up as Tony was walking away. Overall, I found him to be slightly odd, but not that strange of a guy. Shortly after, I left work and went home. I did not see Tony for the rest of the time that I was there. A couple of days went by, and I didn't see Tony at all, but I did get a friend request from him on Facebook. I accepted it because I didn't think that it was that big of a deal. Well, over the next few days, Tony started messaging me on Facebook a lot. He started out just saying hi and asking how I was doing and stuff. Then he asked me to hang out again. I said no once more. I really didn't want to hang out with Tony at all, but he didn't stop asking. I told him no because I was busy at first, so he asked when we could. That's when I said I really didn't know him that well, and I thought we should not hang out at all. I started to just ignore him after that, because he kept messaging me. Tony probably sent me about 4 or 5 messages, all without getting a reply. Then he finally seemed to stop. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, I didn't see Tony at work at all. By this point, I figured that he probably quit or else was fired. After all, I had only actually seen him working at Walmart that one time. He then sent me yet another message on Facebook randomly, and at that point, I decided to block him. The only reason that I hadn't blocked him sooner was because I thought it might be awkward to see him at work. If he was blocked, maybe he would try to confront me or something. Now that I was confident we wouldn't cross paths anymore, I didn't care. Still, I was curious and thought maybe he just worked on the other side of the store. So I decided to ask my manager the next time I worked. When I did, I asked her about Tony, and she said she had no clue who that was. I was told by multiple coworkers that they were unaware of anybody named Tony working there in the last several months. This really creeped me out. I realized that he very easily could have just put on the Walmart vest and pretended to work there. I mean, they're probably pretty easy to find online. After realizing that, I was glad that I blocked him. For the next couple of days, things were back to normal, but then I found myself working again until close one night. As I was stocking a shelf like I often did, somebody entered my aisle. I looked over and saw Tony standing there. He was probably the last person that I wanted to see. He walked over and asked me why I blocked him. I told him to leave me alone. He ignored this and got right in my face. I told him that I knew he never worked here, and he didn't deny it. He admitted that he had just got the vest, as if he was almost proud of it. Then he started to curse me out. While he was still yelling at me, I started to move away, but he followed. When I realized that he was coming after me, I started to run. I was going up towards the front end of the store. Soon, I saw some other people and I went towards them. They were just kind of seeming confused though. Tony was still chasing after me. So at that point, I kept going even farther. I ran all the way to the bathrooms and then went inside of the women's restroom. Tony actually tried to follow me inside. However, someone else saw him go in and came over. I went inside one of the stalls and locked the door. Tony was inside the women's bathroom and approached the stall that I was in. But then I heard another man's voice yelling at Tony to stop being a creep and to get out of there. Finally, after that, Tony left. I emerged from the bathroom a short time later and was careful to look out for Tony, but he was finally gone. Then I found my manager and told her about what had happened. The police actually got called, but unfortunately Tony had left. Over the next few weeks, I didn't see him at all, and not long after that, I quit. I'm hoping that I never see Tony or hear from him again.
This happened last year. I was shopping at my local Walmart, just doing some typical shopping on a random weeknight. The store was pretty quiet, and it was probably like 8 or 9 p.m. I had been in the store for about 15 minutes or so, and I was in the aisle where they have the fitness items. I was looking at one of those massage guns. I wasn't planning on buying one that day, or even buying one at Walmart, but I had been considering getting one. When I walked by, I noticed it and stopped to read the box. I was in the aisle looking at it for a few minutes, and when I was doing so, I remember hearing some voices in the next aisle over. It happened to be a toy aisle, and this was at sort of the back corner of the store. I heard a man's voice, and then the voice of a child. At first, I paid no attention as I was looking, but soon I heard the man say, "I will buy you this toy if you come with me." I assumed it was the child's father at first, but I didn't really know why he would say that. I couldn't really make out what the kid said back to him, but I heard the man then say something like, "Your mom said it's okay." Then, I just had the crazy thought that maybe this wasn't the child's father. The man started saying, "Come on, let's go," a couple of times. I heard him starting to walk to the end of the aisle. I just had a really bad feeling about it. At the time, I didn't know if I was just being nosy or if I should do something. I decided to walk by the aisle and glance down it to see. I left the aisle that I was in and walked into the next one over, which was a toy aisle, and when I looked down, I saw a man wearing a black jacket and winter hat, holding the hand of a little kid and leading her to the other end of the aisle. Their backs were facing me. I was kind of thinking on the fly, and I said, "Excuse me," to the guy. He turned around and looked really surprised. I picked up some random toy from the shelf. It was some type of stuffed animal. I said I wanted to ask the man a question, if this would be a good gift for my niece. I then started walking over to them. He said he had no idea, and I said I thought he might know. I then asked if that was his daughter. He said no, and he was just watching her for the moment, but then said they really had to get going. Him and the child then walked away. I really wasn't sure if I should believe him or not. Maybe I was making too much of it. I realized it probably was a reasonable explanation, and I turned and started to walk into the opposite direction. I was telling myself that nothing was wrong, and I was just paranoid. But I'm not even kidding. About 30 seconds later, I heard a woman's voice calling out a name. For this story, let's just say the name was Sarah. The woman was calling out Sarah, not really loud, but enough for people in the aisles nearby to hear, including me. I walked towards the voice and found the woman a few aisles down and more towards the center of the store. When I reached her, I asked if Sarah was her daughter. She looked concerned and said yes. I had a terrible feeling, and I said that I might have seen her daughter with a man and I thought they might be leaving. We both started sprinting towards the front of the store. The good thing is that this was probably less than a minute since I had seen the man. When we made it to the front of the store, we saw the man and the child at the self-checkouts area. He was buying one of the toys for her. The girl's mother started shouting, and the man claimed he was just trying to be nice and buy the toy for the girl, but he quickly tried to run away after realizing nobody would believe that. He ran out the door and was able to momentarily get away. I was just happy that the girl was okay and back with her mother. It turned out that the girl had wandered off from her mother to look at toys while her mom was shopping in another area of the store. The mother had believed that her child was nearby, but had actually wandered off much further. I also found out that the guy was located not long after this at all.
I used to work at Walmart. I haven't worked there for years now, and when I was there, I didn't really like it that much. I was mostly just a cashier, so it was pretty repetitive. It was a decent job to have at the time, I guess, and I worked there for almost 6 months. I'm going to tell the story of my scariest experience while working there. For a little bit of background, I'm a female and was 23 at the time of this story. During that time period, I lived by myself in an apartment. I lived about 10 minutes away from the Walmart Supercenter where I worked. One night, I was working until 9 o'clock. I was up at the front of the store at the registers. It had been a really typical shift, and things were going somewhat busy until about 7. Then they started to quiet down. A little after that, it was time for my final break of the day. I walked into the break room, which was very quiet. I don't remember if anybody else was inside or not. I don't really think anybody was. Anyways, I was hungry, so I sat down and took off my Walmart employee vest. Then I left the break room to go buy something to eat in the store. I took my vest off because I didn't want any customers coming up to me and asking where stuff was when I was on my break. That had happened to me several times before, until I learned to just take it off. So anyways, I got some food and then went to a self-checkout and paid for it. Then, after that, I went back into the break room and sat back down in my chair. Now, I believe at this time, I was the only person in the break room. I was eating and going on my phone, just enjoying my break. But when it was over, I realized something. My Walmart vest wasn't there. I know for a fact that I had put it on the back of my chair, like hanging over it. My name tag was attached to it as well. I found this to be really weird. I looked all around for it, but nobody was nearby to see if somebody took it or what. I couldn't think of any reason why somebody would take my vest. Soon, it was obvious to me that it wasn't in the break room. I went and found my manager and told him what happened. He told me that there were some extra vests in a closet near the break room. I went in and got one and then returned to work. I was still confused as to what exactly had happened. Maybe somebody took it by mistake or something. So I finished my shift, which was only like another hour and a half longer. Nobody had returned my vest if somebody took it by accident, so I took the new one home that I got. I was still under the impression that it was probably one of my coworkers that took it by mistake. After I clocked out of work, I left the Walmart and drove home. I got back to my apartment, which was what I would describe as an average building. There were several floors and lots of units in the building. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. When I got to my place, I saw that my Walmart vest was sitting on the ground at my doorstep. I really couldn't believe it. I was so confused. I stood there just looking around for a minute. Then I picked it up and went inside. I was happy to get the vest back, but I had no idea how that happened. I had never told any of my coworkers where I lived. Sure, I was friends with a few of them, but never really hung out with them outside of work. The only thing I ever did with coworkers outside of work was go to the Applebee's down the street afterwards once. So there was no reason for them to know my apartment building, much less my exact unit. I started to wonder who could possibly be responsible for this. I worked again the next day. When I was there, I talked to at least 5 of my coworkers about what happened. I told them how somebody took my vest from the break room and then it showed up on my literal doorstep. They all had no idea how it happened, and none of them were responsible. This left me just as confused as ever. That work shift went by normally though, although I will say when I took my break, I took my vest off and brought it with me to get food. Afterwards, I left work and got back to my apartment again. This night though, it was probably like 10:30 at night, and I was in my bedroom watching TV. That's when I heard a knock at my apartment door. Now, it was very unusual for me to get visitors, especially at this hour, so I felt really suspicious immediately, especially after what had happened the previous night. I got up and quietly walked over to my front door. I looked through my peephole to the other side. I saw that there was this creepy-looking man standing there. He had a somewhat messy beard that was dark with some gray in it. The man was thin and also had longer, stringy hair. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans. I had never seen him before that I was aware of. I couldn't help but think to myself, is this the man that stole my vest and returned it here? I was so creeped out and was not going to answer the door. He knocked again from right on the other side. My heart was racing, and I moved back quickly, but also as quietly as I possibly could. I just hoped that he would go away. I sat on my couch with my phone, ready to call the police if he didn't leave. He knocked one more time, and then I thought I heard the sound of him walking away. I felt a little bit better, and I got up and went over to the door. When I looked this time, he was in fact gone. I didn't know what to do with this information now, though. Do I go to the police, or do I just hope that this guy doesn't come back? I mean, I had no proof of anything.
It could have just been a neighbor accidentally at the wrong apartment, or some kind of other coincidence. There was no proof to link this guy to my Walmart vest. Even though my hunch was telling me that it was connected, I did not call the cops. I just decided to hope that the guy wouldn't come back, and that nothing else strange would happen. The very next day, I was working at Walmart again. It was another night shift, like I often had. This time, everything went well until I was almost done. I was working at the cash register as a cashier like always. At one point, I was ringing up a customer, but noticed something in the distance. It was the man who had been at my apartment the night before. He was standing probably about 100 feet away, and he was just staring right at me. He had this sort of creepy smirk on his face. My heart started racing instantly when I saw him. I tried to push that out of my head and returned to focusing on the customer in front of me. When I looked back up to where the man had been about 30 seconds later, he was gone. I looked around, and I didn't know where he went, but I could no longer see him. I just hoped that I wouldn't see him again. And for the rest of my shift, I actually didn't. I was happy about that, and then I clocked out and left. I drove home from work and got back to my apartment once again. I went inside, relaxed for a bit, and then went to bed. That night, I fell asleep pretty quickly, but I woke up sometime after midnight. The first thing I remember after waking up was hearing this weird sound. It was coming from what sounded like the entrance to my apartment, like maybe right outside of my front door. I listened closer and realized that the noise sounded like some kind of saw. It really wasn't that loud. I got up and walked to my bedroom door and then opened it. From there, I could see into my living room, a small part of my kitchen, and the front door. What I noticed was the sawing noise was in fact coming from my front door on the other side. I quickly ran back inside of my bedroom and then locked the door. Then I called the police on my cell phone. I told them that I thought somebody was trying to break into my apartment, and I gave them my address. I was told police would be there shortly, but to me it felt like they couldn't come soon enough. I continued to hear the noise coming from my front door. This went on for probably another 2 or 3 minutes. Then I heard my front door actually opening. I was terrified. I ran to the back corner of my bedroom and hid behind my bed. The person walked into my apartment and seemingly headed straight for my bedroom door. Then they tried opening it. I'm really glad that my bedroom door had a lock. After failing to open the door, I once again heard the same sawing noise, but this time it was coming from my bedroom door, right on the other side. Whoever this was just sawing through my doors to unlock them. This was honestly crazy. The noise went on for probably like 5 minutes straight. I didn't know how much longer my door would hold up before it was broken. But then I heard that the police were here. I heard several more footsteps entering and voices saying police. The person right outside my bedroom door moved away, but I could hear the police quickly caught him. When it was safe, I finally left my bedroom. I saw police with the same man who had been at my door the previous night, and he turned out to be the same guy who had stolen and returned my Walmart vest. Somehow, he knew where I lived. I honestly don't know how he knew that, unless he followed me home sometime. Maybe I just simply hadn't noticed. It was a huge relief that he was caught. I didn't work at Walmart for much longer after that, and I quit a short time later.
This is something that happened like 5 years ago now, but I still remember it really well. It's probably the craziest experience that I've ever had going to Walmart. During this time, I shopped at Walmart quite a bit. I found it to be the cheapest place to get groceries and things like that. However, I was not a huge fan of the store. It was often really busy, and I saw a lot of strange things in my times there. Well, one day, I stopped at Walmart after work, which was a bad idea. I arrived to the Walmart parking lot at probably about 5:30 p.m., and right off the bat, things weren't looking good. I noticed that the parking lot was packed and there were cars everywhere. I drove along the back side of it, and when I was doing so, a car pulled out of one of the parking aisles and nearly hit me. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid them. After that, I parked and started to walk into the store. But when I was about to go across the crosswalk right in front of the doors, a car blew past it. It came within probably 5 feet of hitting me.
so I was already a little bit aggravated at that point. When I walked inside the store, I got a shopping basket and started heading to the grocery section. I really just had to get groceries, and I would be getting about 10 different things or so. I noticed that there were several long lines for the checkouts, and there were countless people walking around in the store. As I walked down one of the main aisles in the grocery section, somebody popped out and nearly hit me with their cart. This was a rough shopping trip to that point, but it only got worse. So I was at the far back wall in the grocery department getting a gallon of milk. Out of nowhere, I heard this voice behind me. It was a child's voice. I looked and saw this little girl who was maybe about 7 years old. She had a full Walmart shopping cart next to her that looked like she had been pushing by herself. The little girl said hi to me, and I said hi back to her and was very confused. She then asked me if I could pay for the groceries for her and her family because they didn't have any money. I asked her if those were her groceries. The cart was literally almost all the way full, and it was easily over $100 worth of items. Not even all of it was groceries, there were some other things too. I said no, I was sorry, but I couldn't. I mean, the whole reason that I was shopping at Walmart anyways is because I didn't have much money at the time. If I wasn't worried about saving money, I would have certainly been at Target instead, or the local grocery store, but those places costed more. The little girl didn't say anything back to me, and then just pushed her shopping cart away in another direction. I thought it was really strange what was going on, and I watched to see where the girl would go. The store was busy and a lot of other people were around, but I noticed that the girl went not that far away. Near a display with frozen foods, the girl went to a woman who I assumed to be her mother. I had to get yogurt, and they were kind of standing near the yogurt, so I ended up going closer to them. As I was getting yogurt, just a few feet away from the mother and daughter with their cart, I overheard them speaking. I heard the mother say something like, "Now go to that man over there and ask him." I looked over my shoulder and saw the girl pushing the shopping cart, which was just about as tall as she was. She made it over to this guy who was standing near another section. I saw her approach him and speak with the guy for maybe 30 seconds. Then she started walking back towards her mother with the cart. I was thinking that maybe they would be able to get somebody to pay for their groceries if their cart wasn't completely full. But I also didn't like the idea of the mother trying to use her daughter to ask strangers to pay for them. I continued with my shopping and went to another section of the grocery department. I went down several aisles getting numerous items before I was almost done. I would say maybe 15 minutes later, and I was just about done shopping and near the bakery now. There were still kind of a lot of people around, and the store was still very busy. When I was looking at a few different breads, I heard the little girl approach me again. I turned around, and she once more asked me to pay for their stuff. I told the girl that she already asked me that, and I said no. I then asked the girl if her mother always makes her ask strangers to pay for their stuff, and she said yes. Then I asked her why, and the girl said so they could get stuff for free. After that, I asked her if she liked asking the people, and the girl was starting to say no, but just as she was answering, her mother came out of seemingly nowhere. The mom got between me and the full shopping cart and almost got right in my face. She angrily asked me why I was talking to her daughter. I told the mother that she asked me to pay for their stuff, and I asked her why she made her daughter go up to strangers like this. The mother said that it was none of my business. She was clearly angry. I told the mother that people might actually pay for them if they had less in the cart, and the mother's response shocked me. She responded by literally saying that they had a cart just as big paid for 2 days prior. This made me think maybe she's not so needy. When she said this, I said something like, "Why do you need so much stuff again then? Do you have 20 kids at home or something?" I then told her to just leave me alone, and I started to walk away. That's when the woman rammed me with her cart. I felt it hit me in the back of my legs as well as my lower back, and it was quite painful. I almost fell over, but didn't. I stopped and turned around, and the woman cussed at me a few times. At that point, I yelled at the woman to get away from me, and as much as I wanted to get in her face and argue with her, I knew that wouldn't be a good idea, so I started walking away again. By now, several people around were staring at the commotion. The woman tossed a few more expletives my way as I walked off, so I thought that was the end of that. I went a few aisles away from the woman and tried to finish up my shopping. It was probably 5 minutes later when I suddenly heard a cart coming towards me at a fast speed. I looked to my left, just in time to see the woman pushing her full cart at me again. This time, I stopped it with my hands, but she still ran into me pretty hard, and it also hit me in the legs a little. the woman once again started cursing me out. She backed up the cart and then tried ramming it into me multiple more times. There were quite a few people nearby who were witnessing what was going on. We shouted at each other for a few moments before some Walmart employees and random shoppers stepped between us. The argument was broken up for the most part, but the woman would not calm down. Walmart ended up calling the police, who showed up really fast. The woman then claimed that I had attacked her, which was completely false. After she got really angry with police as well as Walmart employees and refused to leave the store, they ended up arresting her. The witnesses nearby also confirmed that she had rammed me with the cart multiple times and that I had never even touched her. I really couldn't believe the whole situation. But after that, I was able to leave. The girl, who I think was the woman's daughter, but I'm not even sure, went with police officers. I felt bad for her, but hopefully she had family or friends who would take care of her and be more responsible than that woman was. After that, I never stepped foot in another Walmart.
When I was 16 years old, I got my first job working at a Walmart. It was about 10 minutes away from my parents' house, where I lived at the time. I was in high school and would work sometimes after classes were over or on weekends. During this time, I did not have a car, and my parents would drive me to and from work. I was hoping to earn enough money from my Walmart job over time to possibly buy a car. A couple of months after I started working there, I had a shift one night. I started at 4 p.m. after school and got off at 9 o'clock. I was a cashier and was at the check lanes for my entire shift. Things pretty much went by as usual. The store was not too busy, and there was really only 2 hours where there were a lot of customers. Other than that, it was fairly quiet. I actually was able to get off a little bit early that night. At about 8:45, my manager told me that I could leave now because things were so quiet. I left the check lanes and went to the employees-only area of our store to clock out. Then I texted my mom, letting her know that I was off early. She knew that I worked until 9, and sometimes I would get off a little bit early or later. My mom replied quickly, letting me know that she would be leaving to come and get me. I left the store and walked to the front of it. There were a few benches looking out to the parking lot on the sidewalk area over there. There were also a couple of small plants and trees as well, scattered around. I sat next to this tree on a bench, where I would often sit and wait for my mom to pick me up if she wasn't there already. I went on my phone and just waited. The parking lot was pretty quiet for the most part by now. It was getting to be a little bit later at night. Still, occasional customers would come inside the store or leave. There were also a lot of cars in the parking lot with all of the employees we had, as well as the customers. I remember seeing this one car, which was a larger and older-looking SUV, enter the parking lot. It drove around, and then drove right in front of the entrance doors, which were a little ways to my left. Then it slowly went forward and past me, going to the other set of doors. I watched it go past those doors and take a left, going back through the parking lot. I really didn't think much of it and focused my attention back to my phone. But I remember a couple of minutes later, looking up and seeing the car again. It was back, as if it was taking another lap around the parking lot. It was also moving at a very slow speed. This time, the car came to one of the parking aisles and then turned to go towards me again. It drove along the front of the store and slowed down some more. Then it stopped, literally right in front of me. I had a sort of bad feeling about it for some reason, but I was more confused than anything. This certainly wasn't my mom's car. After the SUV stopped, the passenger side window, which was closer to me, rolled down. Now I could see that there was a man in the driver's seat and he was looking right at me. He then yelled to me, asking if I needed a ride. The man said that he could drive me home or to wherever I was going. I shook my head and told him no thanks. I didn't get a good look at the guy, but I remember that he had sort of dark and long hair and was wearing a baseball cap. He said that I should go with him and waved me over. I still said no, but the man did not drive away. I thought he would leave, but for a few moments he just sat there. Then, suddenly, his driver's door opened up and the man started walking around the car. The next thing I knew, I saw the guy emerge from behind his car and he was walking right towards me. He was moving at a fast pace, and I quickly got up from the bench. I turned and ran for the entrance of Walmart and didn't look back. I made it inside within probably 10 seconds, and then I finally looked behind me. The man had not followed me into the store. I didn't see him immediately outside either, and figured that he had gone back to his vehicle. I remained inside the store, sitting on an inside bench until my mom texted me that she was there. She arrived about 5 minutes after I had entered the Walmart and let me know that she was in the parking lot out front. I walked out and saw my mom's car and got inside of it. When I did, I felt much better. I told her about what had happened and we looked around. Then I saw the same SUV in the parking lot. This time it was parked in a space and the engine was running. We left and luckily were not followed or anything. I remember that when we got home, I called my boss and reported the incident. I'm not sure if the guy ever came back or anything. For the rest of the time that I worked there, nothing like that happened and I never saw the guy either. There's an old saying, the freaks come out at night, and this phrase seems to be especially true at Walmart. I can confirm that from my own experiences. I used to shop there very frequently, and many times I would go there at nighttime. The Walmart located close to where I lived during this time used to be open until midnight. So one time, I went there at about 11 o'clock at night. When I got inside, I noticed how quiet the store was. There were very few people walking around, and at first I was happy to see this. I got a shopping cart and then made my way through the store, getting the items that I needed one at a time. When I reached one of the back aisles in the grocery area, there were these 3 aisles sort of separated from the rest. They were almost like bonus grocery aisles and were a little more secluded and quiet. When I was in there, I was looking at the items deciding what to get. The next thing I knew, I looked up and saw this man standing in the entrance of the aisle. I didn't know where he had come from, but this man was wearing a full Darth Vader costume. It wasn't an official costume, but it was more like he was just wearing all black clothes, a cape, and then a Darth Vader mask. I assumed that it was a joke at first, and I laughed at him. He stood there for a moment, and then started walking closer to me. I told him nice costume, but he didn't respond. He then got up real close to me and was basically staring at me in the face. At that point, it got kind of weird. I decided to just walk away. I took my cart and moved away from there to a different aisle. The Darth Vader man stayed back where I had been before. I figured that he would probably approach some other shoppers. When I kept shopping, I saw him again though. When I was walking from one aisle to another, I saw him standing a long ways away, just facing me. It was like he was watching me, and it really creeped me out. I didn't know who this guy was or why he was doing this. I was sure that he was messing with other people and not just me, but it was still really weird. I tried to hurry up and finish shopping. By now, I was almost done. When I was in the last aisle that I needed to get things in, I saw the guy again. He was standing at the end of the aisle, but now holding a lightsaber. It was just one of those plastic toys, and no doubt he got it from the toy section. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or to be really creeped out by this guy, but the main question I had was why did he keep coming back to me? Then I was done and I walked past him into the checkouts. He did not follow me. I paid for my items and then left the store. I thought that I would not see him any longer. I figured that he was inside and probably looking for another customer to mess with the way that he had to me. So I walked out to my car and then unlocked it. As I was unloading my groceries into the back of my car, I looked over and saw Darth Vader again. He was leaving the store and walking towards me. He was still a long ways away, but I was worried. I hurried up and just tossed the rest of my groceries in the car. Then I pushed my cart into the thing and went to get inside of my car. When I got in and locked the door, he was maybe 10 feet away from me. I started my engine, but the guy was now standing like right in front of my driver's window. He put his head right up to the window and stared in at me. It was really creepy, and he was also still holding the plastic lightsaber toy. He then knocked on my window. I ignored him, and I then put the car into reverse and started to back up. When I did, he took out his lightsaber and started whacking my car. And it wasn't just some playful whacks. Even though the saber was plastic, he was really swinging it. I was honestly afraid that it would damage my car. The man was going crazy, hitting my car like it was a piñata. I kept backing out, and he was hitting my car the entire time. Then I put it into drive and left the man standing there, continuing to swing his lightsaber around. I went home and was still in disbelief as to what had happened. To this day, I honestly still can't believe it. My car was not damaged, thankfully. I still don't know whether to just laugh about it or to be creeped out looking back. The man was certainly an interesting character, and I don't know who he really was. But what I do know is that after the incident, I haven't been back to that Walmart. It's been about 3 months now, and I'm hoping that I don't see him again.
I got my first job working at a Walmart in the summer of 2014. I was a young 16-year-old who was still in high school at the time. This is something that happened about a month into the job. I was a cashier, so obviously I would just be working at the check lanes all the time. Because I was a minor, I also wasn't allowed to work past 10 p.m., but I would often work up until 10. I noticed that after 7 p.m., the store would get quieter and quieter, and by 9 p.m. it would be almost dead. Back then, we were actually open 24 hours, and I was really glad that I didn't have to work that late. One time, I was working a shift until 10 p.m. at the check lanes. I started at 4, and a few hours in, things were starting to quiet down from a busy early evening. I had just finished checking out a customer and had nobody else immediately in line. A man then walked into the check lane. He was thin, average height, and approached me. The only thing he was holding was a Snapple, which is a bottled fruit drink. He held it up to me and said that he wanted to return it. He said that he bought the Snapple and tried it, and it, quote, tasted like crap. I told him that he had to go to customer service to make returns. The man said no, he wanted to return it right here. I pointed to customer service and said that he had to go there to return it, and it wasn't that far away. Either he didn't understand or he just didn't want to, because the man told me how much he paid and asked if I could just give the money back to him. I was sure that he hadn't bought it at my check lane because I hadn't seen him before, and obviously, making a return is not quite that simple. Being the fairly new employee that I was, I didn't want to go against policy either. I remember that the man took another sip of the drink, which was almost halfway gone by now, and then finally walked away. I watched him start to head over to the customer service. I wondered if they were going to let him return it, given the fact that he opened it and was drinking it, but I got another customer in my lane at that point and turned around to help them. After that, a few more people got in line, and I was kept busy for the next few minutes. I ended up sort of forgetting about the guy for a little while. But probably 10 minutes later, I saw the guy get into my line again. I remembered him, and when it was his turn, he told me that they wouldn't let him return the drink. I told him sorry, but that wasn't good enough for this guy. He demanded that I give him his money back. I wondered why he thought this was my problem. After I told him that I was not going to give him any money, he really lost it. The man cursed at me and then held up the Snapple. It was still about half full. The lid was off, and he then splashed it into my face. Everything that was left in the bottle hit me and got in my eyes and hair. I was really shocked. He then slammed the bottle to the ground, cursed at me again, and stormed off. I saw a couple of people standing around. There weren't many people over here, thankfully, but the few that were looked just as shocked as I was. After a few moments, somebody came over and asked if I was okay. I was fine, but sort of embarrassed. My boss came over and told me that I could go wash up and then take a 15-minute break. He asked me a little bit about the situation as well, and I gave him all of the details that I could. I went and washed off my face and then went into the break room. When I came back out into the store after my break, I headed for my check lane, but as I was on the way there, I couldn't believe my eyes. Down at the end of the checkout area, by the exit, there were several police officers removing the same man from the store. I didn't know that he was even still inside of the store. He was yelling something as they slowly exited the store. I had to ask what was going on, and found one of my coworkers. I found out that the guy had been yelling at another employee near the electronics department. I don't think that conversation was about the Snapple. The man was asked to leave, and he refused. When he started yelling at the employee and threatening him, police were called. They arrived quickly, and the man did not comply when they asked him to leave. It seemed to me like the guy just wanted trouble. I also found out that he had no receipt from the Snapple that he got, and that's why they wouldn't let him return it at customer service. That guy was by far the wildest customer I have ever seen. When the man was angry with me, I kind of wanted to just give him the $2 or whatever the Snapple costed, but I didn't have any cash on me and couldn't give him cash out of the register or I would get in trouble, obviously. Plus, given the fact that he harassed another employee for a completely different reason, I don't think it would have solved everything. I worked at Walmart for a few more months before quitting and finding another job. A few years ago, I used to work as a Walmart cashier. This is a job that I only had for about 3 months. I would typically work afternoons and evenings, and I was only part-time. I should also mention that I was a 17-year-old female at the time, and I'm in my 20s now. This was my second job ever, and really wasn't that bad. I would just scan items for customers, and most of my shifts were anywhere from 4 to 8 hours long. One time, I was working 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the check lanes. Things started out fairly busy, and slowly got quieter as the night went on. I was kept busy for almost the entire time, with many customers going through my line. Most of the customers were nice, but every now and then there would be a strange one or a rude one. I would always try to be polite and sometimes make pleasant conversation. Early on in my shift, probably about an hour into it, a man came into my check lane. I don't remember what he bought, but it was just a couple of items. When he got face to face with me to pay, he asked me what time I got off of work. I told him that I got off at 9, not thinking much of it, assuming he was just making conversation with me. The guy was a little bit taller than me, so not very tall. I'm only 5'3". He also had short dark hair, like a buzz cut, and was wearing baggy shorts and a t-shirt. After I told him when I got off, he said, "See you then," and kind of smiled. Then he took his items and walked away. I took this as a joke because it honestly seemed like one to me, the way he smiled and sort of laughed. It was sure weird though, but whatever. I kept on working after that. Hours went by and I forgot all about the man. But later that night, he actually showed up again. I was almost done with my shift and still working at the same register. Things were much quieter in the store now. I remember that as I was scanning items for a customer, I happened to notice the guy walking near me. He was coming from a direction as if he had just entered the store. When he got close to me, he looked at me and said, "Just 10 more minutes, right?" I looked at my watch and it was 8:50. I was confused, but I just kind of said, yeah, and smiled a little. The guy then walked away and I was left wondering why he was here again and why he asked me that. At that time, I was just glad that he had walked away. I kept working, still not thinking too much of it. 10 minutes later, when it was 9 o'clock now, I was done working and I left my check lane. I went in, clocked out, got my things, and then started walking for the exit. When I made it out of the store, I began walking to my car. I was parked at the far back end of the parking lot because it was really busy when I had got there. But I made it no farther than 10 feet when a car suddenly pulled up in front of me. It was this little red 2-door car, and it stopped right in front of me. Before I could walk around it, the driver's window rolled down and I could see the man was driving it. It was the same guy who had talked to me inside. He told me to get in his car on the passenger side. I said that I couldn't, and I started to walk around his car behind it. That's when he started backing up before I could get there. It was like he was trying to block my way with his car, and he told me again to get inside. He kept on nagging me, and I tried to walk farther away. At that point, I just started running. I was able to make it past his car, and I started running for mine. He then began to drive in the direction that I was running in. When I got to my car, I unlocked it and got inside. The man then pulled into the space next to mine before I could drive away. I knew that he would probably follow me wherever I went. At least my doors were locked and I was away from him. He did not get out of his car, but instead rolled down a window again and tried talking to me some more. I ignored what he was saying, and I texted a coworker who I knew was still inside working. Before long, he told the store manager about it. I waited in my car and tried to ignore the man as best as I could. Within a couple of minutes, one of our store managers had walked out into the parking lot and approached the man's vehicle. He asked what the guy was doing and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. The man finally started backing up and then drove away. I waited for a bit, and soon after, I left and went home. After that night, I never saw the man again. I worked there for maybe another month and then quit. Looking back, I'm grateful to my coworker and manager. I really believe that this guy would have followed me home in his car. I don't know exactly what he wanted, but it was a really bizarre situation.
Many years ago, when I was about 10 years old, I would go with my mother to the store a lot. If we were grocery shopping or whatever, I would tag along because I enjoyed it. I have a younger sister, and she would usually sit in the shopping cart that my mother pushed around the store. One day, we went to Walmart, and I think my mom was just doing the usual shopping for whatever. She had a cart like usual, and it was just her, my sister, and me. I don't remember a whole lot, but I do know that it was nighttime, and I think the store was fairly quiet. I know that I left my mother wherever she was, and I went into one of the toy aisles. My favorite things to do when my mother shopped was to go look at toys, video games, and the fish that Walmart used to sell. I would do this just about every time that we went to either Walmart or Target. On this time, my mother was at the other end of the store when I went near the toy area. There were probably about 3 or 4 toy aisles. One of them was girl stuff, and the other would be action figures, and the other was Lego stuff. I remember that I went into the Lego aisle, and I was the only person there for a few minutes. I could have spent all day in just that aisle, looking at all the cool sets that they had. Soon, a man walked in. He was on the other end of the aisle, looking at the Legos for less than a minute, and then he walked over to me. He stopped next to me, and I looked up at him. That's when he asked me which set I was looking at. I showed him whichever one it was. I don't remember though. I was a pretty shy kid, so immediately I didn't really know what to say or do with a stranger talking to me. The man said to me that he would buy it for me. I knew that something wasn't right, and I was really suspicious. I said to the man no, it was okay. He looked really surprised by my answer and asked me why not. I didn't really know what to say, so I told him that I didn't really want it that bad or something. He just kind of said okay, but kept standing next to me. I decided after a little while to leave the aisle and move to a different one, so I went to the next aisle over. I was only there for a few seconds before the man then entered that aisle without saying anything. This caused me to want to move again, and I decided to go much further away this time. I wanted to find my mother, but I wasn't completely sure where she was at the time. I walked out of the aisle and started walking around the store to try and find her. When I got near the grocery area, I saw the man again, and I just knew that he was following me. I ended up walking basically all around the entire store, and I saw the man about 2 or 3 more times. The whole time, I was walking pretty fast, and I didn't stop at all because I was afraid that the man would approach me again if I did. Finally, after probably 30 minutes of walking around the store, I found my mother. I was really happy to see her, and I walked over and stayed next to her for the rest of the shopping trip. At one point, though, I did see the man again. It was shortly before we were leaving, and he was standing about 50 feet away and looking at me. We left, and after that, I never saw him again. I was just happy to be away from him and leaving the store, but I really didn't think all that much of it. I think I was too young to realize how bad of a situation it really was. Many times since then, I've remembered it, and I'm really glad that I walked away from him when I did. This is something really creepy and bizarre that happened to me about a year ago. I went to Walmart late one night. The Walmart I live by closes at 11 p.m. every single day. I think it was around 10 p.m. when I got there. I didn't need to get that many things, just a few. I believe that I was just getting a couple of grocery items. When I was in one of the grocery aisles, I know that I was all by myself. I had been inside of the store for maybe 5 minutes or so. I was just looking at one of the shelves. That's when somebody entered the aisle that I was in. I looked over and saw a woman walking towards me. She was short, had dark hair, and was wearing a sweatshirt and a winter hat as well. She walked right up to me, and I didn't know who she was, so I found it kind of strange. Then she handed me this blank envelope and said that it was for me. When she spoke, she did not have much emotion in her voice at all. It was not friendly or rude, but just kind of like she was stating facts. I was really confused. I accepted the envelope out of curiosity more than anything. Before I could even say something to the woman, she had turned completely around and was walking away. I looked at the blank envelope and was trying to make sense of it. So some random lady in a Walmart just walked up to me and gave me an envelope at 10 o'clock at night. Seems pretty strange to me. I opened up the envelope and looked inside. There was one thing inside of it, and that was it. When I took it out, I saw that it was a Polaroid picture. There was no date or title or anything. And the picture was of a man
wearing all black and a ski mask. The man was looking directly at the camera with an intense stare. I couldn't help but feel very creeped out by this. I mean, it just made no sense at all. Maybe this woman had the wrong person. I looked, but she was gone and completely out of my sight now. So I walked to the end of the aisle and looked for her. By now, I saw that she was walking towards the exit doors and almost there. I thought about running after her and asking her what on earth this was about, but I decided not to. Instead, I found the nearest trash can and discarded the envelope as well as the photograph. So then, after that, I finished up my shopping. I didn't have much more to do, and I wrapped up in the grocery aisle and then headed to the checkouts. I was in the store for maybe 5 more minutes. After checking out, I left and headed for my car. I was parked in about the middle of the parking lot. By now, the parking lot was pretty quiet, but there was still a decent amount of other vehicles there. When I got inside of my car, I noticed that I saw the woman, the same one who had handed me the strange envelope. I looked and saw that she was walking towards my car at a pretty fast pace, but she was still a good distance from me. I didn't know what she wanted, but I had enough strange encounters with her for one day, so I drove away from there before she could reach me. I left the parking lot and then headed home. The woman was left standing in the parking lot, just staring at me. I remember watching her in my mirror, and she was just standing there looking at me. It was really weird. I was glad to get away from there, and I made it home safely. After arriving home, I went to bed. The next couple of days were normal. I did not go to Walmart or anything. But then, probably 3 days after the Walmart incident, I got home from work. I remember that I got my mail like I always did. At this time, I lived alone in a house that was in a pretty typical suburban neighborhood. After bringing my mail inside, I saw this random unmarked letter. Because of the fact that it had no writing or stamps on it, I found this really strange. I mean, whoever left it in my mailbox would have had to hand deliver it. I opened up the envelope out of curiosity. Inside of it was the same photo of the masked man. When I saw this, I got the chills. It was just so creepy. Did the woman come to my home and deliver this to me? I had no idea. And why did she want me to have this so bad? I didn't know that as well. After receiving this envelope and photo, I really didn't know what to do. I talked to a few of my friends about it, and we were all pretty clueless. I mean, I thought at Walmart maybe the woman gave the envelope to the wrong person, but the fact that she hand-delivered it to my house made me think that she really wanted me to have it, but there was no reason to give it to me. Maybe it was still some kind of a mix-up and not meant for me, but I don't know what the purpose of it was. After that night, I never had anything else strange happen. I didn't see the woman again, and I got no more strange envelopes or anything. I'm really glad about that.
I'm a female and was 19 at the time of this story. I went shopping at Walmart one time at about 7 o'clock at night. The store was not that busy, but it also wasn't dead or anything. There were a decent amount of other shoppers. I was getting maybe about 5 things, so not a whole lot. I wasn't planning on being there for very long either. When I was in one of the grocery aisles, this guy approached me, instantly giving me compliments. It was obvious he was interested in me, but the problem was he was much older than I was. I was polite to the guy, but he then asked me for my phone number. I said no and felt that this was just really weird. I mean, even if he was around my age, the way he was going about it struck me as really odd. When I said no, I tried to be nice, and after some obvious disappointment, the man actually walked away. He went out of my sight and I returned to shopping. I felt embarrassment from the really awkward conversation. Luckily, nobody else was around to witness it. I was hoping that I wouldn't see the man again as I continued to shop around the store. I was fast and only needed a couple of other things. I found them quickly and then headed up to the check lanes. I did not see the man during this time. I checked out, took my stuff, and then left the store. Then I got out to my car and started driving home. Now, everything about this was very normal. It took me roughly 10 minutes to get back home. I took a highway for most of it and then a couple of quieter roads. But when I got to my road, I saw a car pulling onto it behind me. It was nighttime, so vehicles behind me, I could mostly just see their headlights and not really the car. The car followed me down the street, and I assumed that it was one of my neighbors. But when I pulled into my parents' driveway, who I lived with at the time, the car pulled in behind me. This was really weird, because I knew that both of my parents were home, and I didn't know who this could be. I parked in the driveway, and the car parked right behind me. It didn't look like any car that I recognized. Then, the driver's door to the car opened. I saw a man get out and start approaching my car. That's when I recognized him. It was the same guy from Walmart. What on earth was he doing here? He soon reached my driver's door and he knocked on the window. I could hear him asking me to open up the door. I wanted to get away from the guy, but he was parked too close for me to drive away. I got my phone and was going to call the police, but decided to call my dad first. He was inside the house and right there. As I was calling him, the man was still knocking on my window and tried opening my door. My dad said that he was coming outside, and within a minute, he was out the front door. When the other guy saw him, he ran back to his car and drove away. I went inside after that, and we called the police. Obviously, the guy was long gone, but I still wanted to report the incident. I had no idea that the man was even following me at all when I drove home. It was harder to tell with it being night out, but I wish I would have. It made me worry for a while after that, knowing that the guy knew where we lived. Luckily, though, I never saw him again.
Summer, I worked at a Walmart, mostly stocking shelves late at night. It was pretty easy and was really the first real job that I had. One night, I happened to be working at around 11 o'clock p.m. We were still open at that time, but we would rarely get many customers then because we closed at midnight. I was in an aisle where we sold pet supplies at the very back end of the store, just stocking a shelf. I heard somebody walking close by and then saw a man enter the aisle and start to approach me. I really didn't like when customers would ask me questions, but I would always do my best to answer them. He came closer to me, and when he did, I noticed that some of his clothes were ripped, and he seemed a little bit off. He said to me that he had a question for me. Then he began to ask something, but never really got to the question. He stopped himself and slowly said to me that he didn't like me. His face changed to an angry look. I had no idea what to do, but I figured this man had to be on some sort of drugs. He slowly walked behind the aisle we were in. I just shook my head and went back to work, but I could tell that the man was just standing there, barely around the corner. As I took products out of boxes and placed them on the shelves, I noticed out of the corner of my eye the man stick his head around the corner for a second and then go back. He still had a very angry look on his face. I did my best to ignore him and figured that he would walk away soon enough. About 5 minutes passed by, and as far as I knew, he was still there. Then out of nowhere, several items came flying off the shelf near me as if they had been pushed from the other side. Now this annoyed me. I said in a firm voice to the man that he should just get whatever he came here to get and leave. What he said in response was that he was going to get me, and then he called for me to come around the corner to the other side. I ignored it and started to pick up the items that fell. He called out a couple of more times for me to come out, but I just ignored him once again. About a minute later, I heard the sound of more people in the aisle next to mine. It sounded like 4 or 5 men were suddenly in the aisle. I decided to walk over and look, and saw several police officers start to take the man away. One of the officers walked over to me, and I asked him what happened. He told me that that man had assaulted somebody in a nearby restaurant a few blocks away in a seemingly random attack and then fled. He was found at the Walmart. It seemed like he was going for me next.
This story takes place 2 summers ago when I worked at Walmart just for the summer. I usually stocked shelves and worked late nights. I only worked about 2 nights a week, but it was a good way to make some extra money. The Walmart I worked at wasn't in the nicest of areas though. We would occasionally have shoplifters, and just weird and crazy things happened throughout the store in the short time that I worked there. It's more of a reason I was glad just to be stocking shelves late at night and not really dealing with the customers a lot. Anyways,
One night, I was doing what I usually did, which was taking products out of boxes and placing them on the shelves. I was near the canned goods when I received a call on my walkie from someone saying my name. I asked how I could help. They told me they needed me in the receiving area to help unload a truck. This is something that I would occasionally do, so it was nothing really that new. I walked through the quiet aisles of the store to the back, and then into the back room. I got out to the area where the trucks would back into. When I got there, the truck I saw wasn't a normal big semi-truck. It was a smaller one. It was still a truck, but it was just a lot smaller. I had never seen that type of truck deliver anything to us before, but I walked out anyways. I saw someone come out of Walmart behind me with a walkie in their hand. They said, "Thanks for helping me with this." But it was nobody that I recognized at all who worked there. There were a lot of employees, however, so I figured he must be new. He had a smile on his face, but then it disappeared as he saw the confused look on mine. I asked what he needed help with. The man then got to the truck and unlocked the back himself. He told me to hop in and get some merchandise from the back. That was when red flags started going off in my head. I didn't go any closer to the truck, but just stayed put. That's when the man started to nudge me from behind. He caused me to move a couple of steps forward, but I wasn't going to let him push me into the truck. I started to see there appeared to be nothing really at all in the back of the truck, and that's when I suddenly took off. I was fast enough to get away from the man, who then turned and chased after me. I was decently fast and made it back inside the store okay. Then I ran as far to the front as I could where there was more people. At that point, the man turned and left back out of the store. I let another employee know what had happened, and soon after, the police were called. The men were long gone, but they did find several videos of them on surveillance. I'm not really sure if they were ever found, but I know I'm glad I was able to escape them. This story takes place last summer. I was at Walmart pretty early one Saturday morning, which was a common time for me to do my shopping. I got there and began my shopping, and was happy to see that the store wasn't too busy yet. I pushed my cart around the store, and it slowly filled up with mainly groceries. When I was in the frozen pizza aisle, I noticed that I was hearing a noise from behind me as if someone was there. Obviously, that's not weird at all, but when I would look in the direction, nobody would ever be there. The same thing happened for a few minutes later in another aisle. It was sort of strange, but overall not that big of a deal to me, and I kept on shopping. Finally, I got to the far back corner of the store where they had some dairy products such as eggs, milk, and cheese. I was buying some eggs when I heard another noise. This time, it sounded like it was coming from above me. I looked to my left and saw part of the ceiling was lifted up and a man was sticking his head out of it staring at me. I was totally freaked out, and this was about the last thing that I was expecting to see. The man then stuck his head back into the ceiling. The whole thing was really alarming to me. After that, I walked over and found someone who worked there and told them that I had just witnessed a man who was in the ceiling. They didn't believe me at first, but after I explained it to them, they went and got another worker, and we went to the area. We saw where the tile in the ceiling was slightly crooked. Eventually, they called other employees over, and it became a whole thing. A lot of people asked me about what I had seen. Eventually, they went up into the ceiling and looked, but the man was never found. I think that some people didn't believe me, but I know what I saw clear as day. I don't know who that guy was or what he was doing, but he seemingly went up into the ceiling and just disappeared. I had a job a few years ago that was pretty tough. I worked some insanely long days and got home very late at night sometimes. One night I was working late, and I left work so sleepy that I could barely stay awake. I began driving home, and after about 10 minutes I knew I wouldn't make it all the way back before falling asleep. I pulled into the next exit where there was a 24-hour Walmart that I knew of. It was sometime after 2 in the morning when I got there. My goal was to just walk around a little bit to wake up, and maybe buy an energy drink or something with caffeine in it. I got inside the store and began to walk around. I only saw a few customers at the front end of the store with some employees, but other than that it seemed almost completely empty. I was walking around the back end of the store for a little bit, slowly starting to feel more awake, when I noticed someone walking behind me. They were walking behind me at an extremely close distance that was very uncomfortable. I stopped and looked behind me. There was a man that was no more than 5 feet away. He stopped as well and stared at me with a blank look on his face for a second. He was about 6 feet tall, wearing a brown suit jacket with a brown turtleneck. He then turned and walked away into a nearby aisle. I continued to walk around the store, but it wasn't long until the man was back again. This time, as soon as he got close, I turned to him and said, "Can I help you?" He once again just changed directions and walked away. I decided it would be best for me to just leave at that point. I went and got an energy drink and checked out. I was feeling more awake now though, and also a little bit creeped out by the man. I left the store and walked back to my car. Something about the way the man was staring at me just kind of gave me the creeps. Luckily for me, I was way more awake now, and I was able to drive home without any problems. If that were the full story, it would be bad enough, but sadly it's not. I drove home, and of course when I got there, I fell asleep immediately. But I woke up about an hour or two later to the sound of a truck engine running very loudly. I looked out of my bedroom window to the street. I saw a truck sitting on the street in front of my window. In the front seat was the same man staring at me. He still had that blank look on his face. Almost right away after I looked at him, he screeched his tires and sped away. I've never been able to figure out who this man was or what he wanted from me, but I never did see him again.
For a little background, I'm a female and live fairly close to several different Walmarts. There was one in particular, though, that I would typically go to because it was the closest to my house. I would say that I went there maybe once a week on average. I did most of my regular shopping there because the prices were cheaper than most other grocery stores. One night, I went there at maybe 8 o'clock or so. I was going around the store and getting a few things. The store was pretty quiet, I remember, and because of that, I noticed that someone seemed to be following me around. I really didn't know exactly when they started, but I walked through about 4 aisles with the same person trailing me. I stopped and looked back. It was a Walmart employee. He was sort of short and had dark brown hair and glasses, and when I looked at him, he kind of stopped. Then I turned and kept going. But shortly after I left the aisle, I saw him again. I couldn't believe it. It was so obvious that he was following me, but I didn't know why. I decided to go to a random aisle sort of far away. He followed me, saying about 30 feet back at least. When I got into an aisle, I stopped there, and he stopped at the end of it. I couldn't take it anymore, so I approached him. I walked to the end of the aisle where he stood, seemingly looking at items on the shelf. He must have been trying to make it look like he was working and not following me. I said to him, "Is there a reason why you were following me around the store?" The guy looked at me all confused and claimed that he wasn't. He said that he didn't know what I was talking about. I told him how he had gone down every aisle that I did for the last 5 minutes at least. He claimed that it must have been a coincidence and said that he was always moving around the store. I just shook my head and walked away. When I did, he didn't follow me. The fact that I confronted him hopefully let him know that I knew what he was doing. I didn't feel like reporting him or anything though. I finished up my shopping and then left without seeing the guy. After this experience, I figured that it wouldn't happen again. After all, I had caught him. But the next time I went to that Walmart, roughly about a week later, it did happen. This time, it was harder to tell. He did a better job of following me while still keeping a distance, but I could still tell that he was following me. I had noticed him not that long after entering the store. I noticed him across the walkway in another aisle. I moved away, hoping that he hadn't seen me yet at all, but I saw him again a short time later, closer to me. When I moved to another aisle just a short time later, I saw him at the end of that aisle. At that point, I decided to just leave. I didn't even bother to buy anything at all. I was pretty creeped out by the guy. He didn't follow me out of the store or anything, and I hoped to not see him again after that. I considered not going back to that Walmart after. The next time that I had to go to the store, I went somewhere else. But several weeks later, I must have forgotten about it, because I went back to the Walmart and was hoping to have a normal shopping trip. I wasn't thinking about the guy until I noticed him again. It was maybe 5 minutes after I had entered the store, and he was walking by about 20 feet away. When I remembered him, I decided to just leave immediately. I would go to the next closest Walmart instead, which was maybe 5 to 10 minutes away. I turned and started walking to head out. When I did, I sensed him walking behind me. I looked over my shoulder and saw that he was in fact walking behind me. He was maybe 20 feet back. I went straight for the exits and walked out of the doors. To my surprise, he walked right out of the doors after me. I couldn't believe it. After maybe 10 feet of walking through the parking lot, he was still following me. At that point, I just started running. I sprinted for my car, unlocked it, and got inside. When I did, I looked around for the guy, but I didn't see him at all. I'm not sure exactly where he went, but he could have easily been hiding behind any car in the parking lot or something. I left and went to another store. After that, I did not go back to that Walmart. I called them up and reported what had happened, but I'm not sure how they handled it. I'm not sure what the guy was doing either and why he thought he could always follow me around like that. I've thought a few times that maybe he didn't even work at the Walmart. Maybe he was just wearing the vest. It's possible, but I honestly think that he did work there. When he followed me out of the store, it was really unexpected though. I'm hoping that I never see him again. I worked at a Walmart store when I was younger and in high school. This was one of the first jobs that I had, and I didn't have a car yet or a consistent means of transportation. Most of the time, I would get a ride from my parents or older brother. My parents worked odd hours, and my brother also had a job and played football as well, so I never really knew who could drive me, but usually it all worked out. Well, one time I worked a night shift until like 9 p.m. or something like that. I remember that we lived like 10 minutes from the Walmart, and when I got off, I texted my mom. She was not able to come and get me, so I then texted my dad and older brother. Unfortunately, I didn't hear back from them right away. So during this time, I was inside the Walmart in the break room sitting down. Another coworker who I was sort of friends with named Rachel asked me if I was off, knowing that I got done at around 9. I told her yes, but I was waiting for my brother to text me back. Rachel had to leave the break room to go back to work, but said bye or something like that. Then there was just one other person in the break room. It was this guy named Michael, who was about 5 years older than me, if I had to guess. I really didn't know anything about him, other than that he worked at the Walmart, and I think stocked shelves. I had never really spoken with him or crossed paths with him to that point. I had seen him just here and there. He suddenly walked over to me and asked if I needed a ride home. He said that he had just gotten off and was leaving. Now, because I didn't know him that well, I was a little hesitant and I said no thanks. But Michael said that it would be no trouble and he wanted to. He was a coworker, so I figured that he must just be trying to be nice, and I looked at my phone and saw that I hadn't gotten a text back. I was tired and wanted to leave, so I finally said yes. I offered to pay Michael gas money, but he said no. So I followed him out into the parking lot and we walked to his car. It was a really old, rusty, beat-up looking pickup truck. We both got inside and I gave Michael my address. He said that he knew where that was and it wasn't very far away from his place. Then we left. We started to talk during the ride, and we just got to know each other a little bit, asking basic questions and stuff. I wasn't paying that great of attention to the road, but I did notice that Michael turned before it would have been my street. I didn't say anything at first, even though I should have. He drove down this road a little while, and I wasn't really sure what he was doing. I was hoping that maybe he was just taking a different way of getting to my house. We were close, but not at all on the correct street. Then Michael pulled off of that street and into this parking lot of an apartment complex. He proceeded to drive up to it and park in one of the spaces. I asked him where we were, and he said that this was his apartment. I told him that he was supposed to drive me home, not go to his place. He then said that I may as well come inside and hang out for a while then. I was angry and said that I didn't want to. I told him to drive me home, and he said no. I told Michael that I really had to get home. It was late and I had school the next morning. Michael told me that I could stay the night at his place, which I obviously said no to. Michael then said too bad and just started walking into his apartment. Now, I was at least a few miles from home, in some random apartment parking lot. I couldn't believe that Michael had done that to me, but I guess it was good he didn't try to force me to go inside with him.
I called my brother again, who still hadn't texted me back, and luckily, he actually picked up the phone. He said that he had just gotten off of work early and could get me. I walked to the end of the apartment complex parking lot and waited. About 10 minutes later, my brother showed up. I was able to get home safely that night, and after that, I didn't bother to report Michael to work or anything. I didn't want to make a big deal out of the situation, and I figured that I would just try to stay as far away from Michael as I could and never talk to him again. And that was going well at first, but only for about a week. Then, one night, I got off of work kind of late again. This time, I had my dad coming to pick me up, but I had to wait for him. So I walked outside of the Walmart and stood around on the sidewalk. Things were pretty quiet around the Walmart, and the parking lot was also quiet at this time. Maybe 5 minutes into waiting, I noticed a truck driving to the front. It was Michael's truck. He stopped right in front of me. Then he rolled down the window and asked me if I needed a ride. I said no. Michael said he would give me a ride to my place this time. I said no again, and added that my dad was already on his way. Michael didn't answer, but rolled his window back up. But he didn't drive away like I thought he would. Instead, I heard his driver's door open and saw him start to walk around the vehicle in my direction. I walked right back inside the Walmart and didn't stop. I went down a few random aisles until I realized that Michael was not following me. Then I went straight to a manager and reported the whole thing. Michael was gone at that point though. My dad arrived a short time later and I got a ride home with him. The next time that I worked, a few days later, I found out that Michael had been fired. I was glad, and luckily, after that, I never saw him again.
I used to work at Walmart. I worked there for about 6 months, and I mostly just stocked shelves. I also worked past close often and would work overnights. The job was pretty easy, and I would usually get there at about 10 o'clock at night and work until 6 a.m. The store closed at 11 p.m., so for about an hour I would be working with customers in the store, although generally there were very few of them at that hour. Our particular location was probably one of the quieter ones. We were always hiring and often a little bit short-staffed, even with it being one of the quieter Walmarts. I imagine that some other Walmarts probably have lots more employees than we did. One night, I got to work at 10 o'clock and had some boxes of items to stock shelves with in the grocery area. At around midnight, I was by myself in one of the back grocery aisles. It was mostly quiet in the immediate area where I was. But out of nowhere, I heard something fall off of seemingly one of the top shelves in the next aisle over. I thought this was weird, and I stopped what I was doing to go see. I figured that another coworker was there for some reason. When I walked around the corner and looked into that aisle, I didn't see anybody at all. I went back to what I was doing and continued with work. For the next 10 minutes or so, everything was normal. But then, out of nowhere, I saw this guy walk into my view for just a second. He was passing by my aisle and did not appear to be an employee, but I only saw him for like a second. I got up and walked over. When I looked around the corner, I saw him disappearing into another aisle. I called out asking who was there, but got no response. I decided to go and see who it was. I walked over and into the aisle where the guy went. When I looked down this one though, I didn't see anybody. It was really strange because I didn't hear him leave the aisle. I was sure that he was there. I kept looking down that aisle, and then I saw him. He was hiding within the aisle on the bottom shelf. He was mostly covered by boxes and was about halfway down. I just barely saw his head peeking out between the boxes. It was a really strange sight. I should have just walked away and found my boss, but I decided to call out to the man again and ask him what he was doing. When I did, he did not move or answer me. I told him that he had to leave and we were closed. I don't think this really had much of an effect on him though. He remained hidden, even though I knew where he was, and he also knew that. I left at that point to find my boss. I walked a ways away, and I let him know that there was somebody hiding in one of the aisles. We both walked back over to the aisle where the man was, but when we got there, we were just in time to see him running away. He went sprinting out of the aisle and out of both of our sights. We briefly walked over to where he had gone, but he had been running pretty fast. My boss told me that it would be taken care of, and I could go back to work. As my boss walked away, I heard him radioing in to somebody else, and I felt at ease about the situation. I went back to work after, like usual. I stocked shelves for the next hour and a half or so. But then, as I was over there by myself, I heard a noise of somebody approaching me. I turned around and once again was expecting to see a coworker, but I saw the same guy. Somehow, he was still here. I thought my boss told me he was going to take care of it. The guy startled me, and I got up and immediately started running away. It was the only thing that I could think to do. The crazy part is the man actually started running after me. He gave chase as I ran past several aisles before finding a coworker. When another coworker saw us, the man finally diverted and ran into another direction. At that point, both my coworker and I went in the opposite direction of the guy. The police ended up being called, and a bunch of us employees were evacuated from the store. When the police got there, they went inside and were able to catch the man after probably 10 minutes. I'm not sure how, but the guy had been able to elude everyone for several hours. He stayed in the store after closing, and nobody was able to kick him out. He would hide in the store and move around when nobody was watching him. What his ultimate plan was, I don't know. It really creeped me out though. I'm glad that I saw him when I did. I'm not even sure why he was approaching me. I had a really crazy situation when I was shopping at Walmart just a few weeks ago. I went there sort of late at night to buy a couple of things. I didn't really want to go, but I knew that I would be busy the next day. So I drove to the Walmart, which thankfully isn't too far from my place. I parked my car in the parking lot, which was more empty than I was expecting. I parked sort of on the side, but still in front of the store. I got out of my car and walked through the parking lot to go in. And when I did, I noticed that there was this one random car parked a little closer to the store than I was, and I passed it by. There were at least 3 people inside of the car, and it was running. But aside from that, I didn't really pay much attention. I went inside of Walmart and walked around the store shopping and getting the things that I needed. It was really dead inside, and so I was able to shop pretty quickly. It probably took me less than 5 minutes to get everything that I needed. Then I went up to a self-checkout, paid for everything, and left. So I walked out of the Walmart to go back to my car at this point. Not long after I made it out of the store, I noticed something. There was a man at my car, and the passenger side door was open. He was looking inside of my vehicle. I didn't know how this happened or why, but I quickly started running over to my car. I yelled at the man, saying that was my car. When I got about halfway there, he suddenly stopped and looked at me. Then he took off running in another direction. I reached my car and then saw the man run to the other car that had been running in the parking lot. He got inside the back seat and the car quickly squealed away. Now I went around and got into my car. I looked over and saw that my glove box as well as the center console were open. There were random things on the floor and passenger seat which had been in them, but I didn't really have anything that valuable in my car, which was good. So I got inside and was about to call the police when I heard a noise from behind me. I looked, and there was another man in the back seat of my car on the passenger side. He was ducked down and almost hidden from my sight. When I saw him, I quickly opened my door and left my car. I ran all the way to the Walmart front doors and then called the police. I watched my car from there, and at first, the man didn't get out. Then, after maybe a minute, he opened up the back door and sprinted away to the side of the Walmart building and out of my view. At that point, I walked back out of the Walmart and went to my car again. This time, I got in, checked it for any more people, and luckily there was no one else. Then I locked the doors and waited for the cops to get there. In the meantime, when I was waiting, I was constantly looking around. I noticed at the side of the parking lot, I saw the guy again. He was really far away and walking. Then the car which I had seen before entered the parking lot going really fast. It then stopped, and the man who had been inside my car got inside of it. The car then sped away, once more screeching the tires when it left. After that, they quickly went out of sight. The police arrived just a few moments later. I told them everything I could, giving a description of the man as well as their vehicle. After that, I went home. I don't know if those men were ever located. I had a bizarre experience after shopping at Walmart not too long ago. It was a normal afternoon, and I was doing some grocery shopping. I was at my local Walmart, located roughly 10 minutes from my house. The store was pretty busy, with lots of other people shopping. I was inside for at least half an hour and in one of the grocery aisles. When I was there, a man struck up a conversation with me. The man was probably about 5'8", had glasses, and was bald. He started out saying hi to me and asked me what I was shopping for. It seemed a little bit strange because he didn't work there and usually other people don't talk to you. The way he spoke was somewhat friendly, but it seemed a little bit odd. I said I was doing some grocery shopping and was almost done. He spoke with me a little bit longer, asking me if I was going home after, and I said yes. I found that question a little bit odd, but the man then told me that he had a lot more shopping to do and started to go over several things that he was buying. I figured that he was just trying to be friendly, and I didn't really mind talking to him, even though it was a little bit awkward. The conversation really only lasted for a couple of minutes. Then I told the guy that I was going to check out after I got the last item, and I said bye to him. He said bye as well, and seemed to walk in another direction. I then went over to the self-checkout area and started scanning all of the items from my cart. It was kind of busy over there, and every other register was occupied by a customer. A line was even starting to form of people after I got there. Within the crowd of people though, when I was almost done checking out, I saw the man who had talked to me. He was in line to check out and behind somebody that was also waiting. He was kind of hard to see, but it was definitely him. It seemed a little bit odd to me because I thought he had told me that he had more shopping to do, but I really didn't think too much of it. I just finished checking out and then left. After leaving the store, I loaded up my groceries into my car and then drove away. Everything went fine, and I got back home about 10 minutes later. I went inside and put everything away. When that was done, maybe 5 minutes after arriving back home, I looked out of the front window. I have a large front window off the dining room on the right side of my house. It looked right out to the driveway and then the street. When I looked out there, I saw a car coming down the street. The neighborhood is usually quiet, and cars driving by is not something that happens every minute. I just casually watched the car drive by, and I didn't know or care who it was. That is, until it turned right into my driveway. This made me really confused. I had no clue as to who it would be. After the car parked, I was still there about 5 feet away from the window, looking out. The door of the car then opened, and I saw the same guy from Walmart get out of it. He then walked right up the driveway to my front door. As he was walking up, I quickly ducked down. I really don't know if he saw me or not, but he proceeded to knock on my door, to which I did not answer. I was too creeped out. He knocked again, and I stayed where I was. I didn't even want to get up, or he might be able to see me. After probably 5 minutes, I hadn't heard anything in a little while, and I got up. I saw that he wasn't at the front door anymore, but then I looked over to the left and realized that he was at another front window. He was looking in, and I ran out of the room. After that, I was ready to call the police if the guy tried to break in or something, but when I went back to look a few minutes later, he was actually gone. His car was also not in my driveway, and I felt much better. I haven't seen him since. I really don't know how he knew where I lived. He must have followed me home without me noticing or something. I'm glad he didn't try breaking in. Why he went to my house in the first place, though, I don't know. I used to work at a Walmart supercenter several years ago. I only worked there for about 6 months, if that. My job was just stocking shelves, and I often worked really late at night and after the store had closed. It was a job that was pretty easy, so I didn't really mind it that much. But one time, I was working, and the store hadn't quite closed yet. Still, I was stocking shelves in sort of the back middle of the store. It was normally a pretty quiet area, and I was all by myself. About 30 minutes went by, and I hadn't seen anybody at all. At that point, I put in some headphones, which I did all the time. I think the store was closing in like 10 minutes at that particular moment. So I was now listening to my music and stocking the shelves. Not long after this though, I could sense that somebody was behind me. I looked over my shoulder and saw this woman standing there. She was wearing this really creepy looking mask over her face. It wasn't covering her entire head, but just the face, including her eyes. It really freaked me out at first, especially with the music in my ears, so I hadn't heard her approaching. She was like 20 feet away from me. I took my headphones out and laughed, realizing it was probably a joke.
I jokingly said that she scared me, but the woman just stood there and did not say anything at all. I then asked if I could help her with something, but she still didn't say anything. So after another awkward moment or two, I said that I was going to get back to stalking, and I did so. A few moments later, I looked back, and the woman was now gone. It was very strange, but I figured there was just somebody trying to get a reaction out of me. I continued with my work. For probably an hour, I was just working like normal by myself in that area. I moved a couple of aisles over, but was still in the same general location. And that area was still very quiet. Then I remember I randomly turned around again and saw that the woman was back. Now this was really weird, because we were closed now and had been for well over an hour. I couldn't believe that I saw her once more. She was just standing there like before, and I asked her what she was doing here. I said that the store was closed. Of course, the woman didn't say anything at all. She then picked up a random item off the shelf and threw it at me. It hit me and I stood up. She picked up something else and tossed that at me too. I didn't know what was going on. I just left the aisle out the back way and walked quickly to try to find another coworker. When I did this, I heard the woman walking after me. I headed to the front of the store, and at that point, I lost her. I found my manager and told her about the woman, and she radioed to somebody else. Before I knew it, the police got called, and they entered the store and searched for the woman. Apparently, this lady had also done the same thing to another coworker. Eventually, the police were able to locate her and get her to leave the store. After that, we all went back to work. That was my craziest experience working at Walmart.